Good evening. I'd like to call to order this continuation of this special meeting of the Village Westmont Planning and Zoning Commission for Wednesday, May 7, 2025. May we have a roll call, please, Madam Secretary?
Commissioner Lynn,
Here.
Commissioner Donahue,
Present.
Commissioner Simpson,
Present.
Commissioner Thomas,
Here.
Commissioner Peterson is here, Commissioner Sharp,
Yes. Here.
and Chairperson Carmichael.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. Anyone like to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And while you folks are standing, anyone who testifies tonight needs to be sworn in. So if you're going to testify, please stand and raise your right hand and say that any and all testimony you give tonight will be the complete truth. Thank you. And a reminder for everyone, please silence your phones and any other devices. A reminder, too, for anyone who testifies that needs to sign in at the podium with their name and contact information. And, yeah, if you do that ahead of time, it'll save time. Next item is the approval of the minutes of our April 23rd, 2025 special meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move. Thomas.
Second.
Sharp.
Move Thomas. Second. Sharp. Okay, we have moved and second. Any discussion on those minutes? Questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Donahue,
Present.
No,
Commissioner Simpson,
Present. Wait.
no, we're
agree.
voting
Aye.
on the,
Aye.
oh, sorry, yes, aye,
Yeah. Sorry. Aye.
yes. Aye,
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson votes yes, Commissioner Sharp,
Yes.
Commissioner Lynn,
Yes.
and Chairperson Carmichael.
yes. Okay. Next item, before we get to the new business, I'd like to review for everyone present here our way we're going to conduct these public hearing procedures. To begin with, there's only one case on the agenda tonight, and which is a continued public hearing from our previous special meeting on the proposed zoning ordinance text amendments. Since this is a continuation, I'm not going to have staff or our consultant present again, but instead I'd just like to ask staff to provide a brief recap of our previous meetings' discussions on the zoning ordinance text amendments. And then following the staff's recap, we'll open the floor for public comment like we did the last meeting. And as before, I'd like to adhere to the time limits, 5 minutes for each individual, 10 minutes for someone who is representing multiple people or groups. And then after the public comment period, we'll move on to commissioner comments. And for this portion, the way I'd like to conduct this is just go through these proposed text amendments article by article, and then allow every commissioner to provide any input on these specific sections. And that will also ensure that staff will be able to accurately record all of any and all requested changes and provide direction to us. And last, I'd like to note that due to the scope of these proposed changes and the information provided, it's likely that this case will be continued to a future date. The continuation will allow time for staff to make adjustments and gather further input as required. And we'll be watching the clock. I would anticipate that if we're not getting finished, I'll like to probably call the meeting around 9 p.m. And again, thanks everybody for coming. Okay, under old business, public hearing PZC 001-2025, requests from the Village of Westmont regarding zoning ordinance text amendments as follows. Zoning ordinance text amendments to repeal Appendix A, zoning of the Westmont Code of Ordinance, and to establish a new Chapter 95 zoning of the Westmont Code of Ordinance, with comprehensive updates to the entire zoning ordinance, including amendments to the zoning districts, development standards, planning processes, and other zoning regulations. If we have to continue this meeting as anticipated, I'll need a motion and a second from the board for a June 11th, 2025 meeting at 6 o'clock, which would coincide with our regular planning and zoning meeting, that second Wednesday of June. Okay. Staff,
Thank you,
you
Chair.
got the floor.
I'm the senior planner, Scott Williams. I just wanted, before we started with the public comment portion, just provide a recap for people that are watching online and in the audience, as my commissioners were already here last week, or last meeting. So last meeting, we had, on April 23rd, a special meeting to present the text amendments for the comprehensive update to the zoning ordinance. This meeting tonight is a continuation of that public hearing. The zoning ordinance that we're looking at, the existing zoning ordinance, hasn't been updated since 1979 comprehensively. That's why this is a pretty important time for the village to look at these text amendments and have discussions on the future of the text itself and provide staff with general direction. The proposed draft language was provided to the commissioners on April 8th and was posted on the website on April 8th for the public to view. Since the posting of that draft, we haven't changed any language. After this meeting, we likely will have some direction to change some of the language as we proceed. We may present some of the language as well during the meeting on what the changes might be as we go along. Additionally, some of the documents, such as like the staff report and the summary memo that we've provided previously, were posted on the website when the agenda was posted prior to the last special meeting. Tonight, you have in front of you just a recap memo from staff. A lot of the staff report information from the last meeting is still relevant to this meeting. It's kind of a good guide to the changes article by article when we go through that for the commissioners. During that April 23rd meeting, we had our village consultant, Kirk, who's next to me, of Duncan Associates, present some of those key changes and the goals of these updates. I and some of the staff as well provided a summary of the staff report and reasoning behind some of the changes that we're proposing in the new text. We also heard from the public during that meeting. We opened the floor for public comment. We heard various topics. Some of them are in that summary memo in more depth, but a few things we heard include comments and suggestions for accessory structures and uses like ADUs, accessory dwelling units, changes to the bulk standards in the R3 district related to lot width. We heard opinions on outdoor storage in the manufacturing district, outdoor dining, and the manufacturing district primary uses as well. And we also heard some comments related to the downtown design regulations. As the commissioner already mentioned, due to the amount of information, we do think this public hearing will probably continue as we propose new language depending on the comments received from the commissioners tonight and how much we get through tonight. Additionally, we provided the minutes from the last meeting. Adam, our planner, rushed to get those minutes done, so you guys had them to reference during this meeting. The full recording of the presentation that Kurt provided and the meeting itself is available on the village's YouTube channel for everybody to view. Those are usually posted directly after the meeting or the day after that meeting. So tonight's meeting, as stated, we're going to be taking in some of the commissioners' comments. We're going to open it back up for the public to comment, but there will likely be another opportunity for the public to comment with some of the proposed changes, depending on what the commissioners provide to us. Additionally, in the staff report, we provided the comments we received from the public. We received one comment prior to the deadline on the Friday before the meeting, before the agenda is posted, that you likely were able to look over before the meeting. That's about all I have, and I'm happy to answer questions on the summary. And then obviously, as we go article by article, I will be, as the chair said, we'll be providing just some recaps of the articles and those changes as we go through, and some of the public comments we received prior to the last meeting.
Okay, thank you. Anyone from the public would like to come and address the commission?
Thank you. I'm Kyle Dispenza, and I apologize, we were out of town on the April 23rd meeting, so I'm a little behind. We have some questions and just some things that came up while I was reading what I could. But like you said, there's a lot to go through. A lot of great ideas. I do feel Westmont needs the changes, but I noticed that you recommended increasing the building height in the B1A district to 5 stories versus 3. I often attend these meetings as well, and I know that our developers will ask for even more stories than that. The concerning part to me was that with that, you'd also be reducing the parking minimums. So we're going to have large, tall buildings, but less parking requirement for them. And I feel we already have not enough parking downtown, especially once that one North Cass property is sold. I know there's already discussion about the Sentinel Station being there, a mixed-use development, and I worry about the size that's going to go there with the minimum parking reduction. You also mentioned ADUs, so kind of wondering who's going to regulate ADUs if they do pass, and will that include living spaces above garages? I've been to a lot of meetings where that was always denied, so that would be something new to Westmont. I think a lot of people would be interested in that, but who's going to regulate who lives there? I know we have a lot of rental properties, homes, especially near me in Westmont, that there's multiple families living in that aren't related. Usually multifamily should be one family if it's, one property, not apartments. And so just wondering who's going to regulate or supervise on that. And again, just worried about the parking downtown and how we would relieve that once we do welcome these new developments and less parking requirements. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Good evening, sir.
Hi, good evening. I'm David Meek. I was here 2 weeks ago. I represent the owners of 751 Blackhawk Drive. 2 things, and we had a chance to talk last time. I appreciate that. I'll be brief. I had a chance actually to see a rather lengthy summary of comments that Attorney Mark Daniel had provided to the commission. I think it was probably distributed to you today if it hasn't been distributed yet.
We just got it a few minutes
You just
ago.
got it a few minutes ago, so you haven't had a chance to digest it. I urge you to take a look at it. There are some things in there that he and I talked about, which I also agree with, which relate to, and I'll just reiterate this again, our concern about the regulation of outdoor operations, whether it's parking of vehicles, and I think hopefully you will allow an opening up or not regulating as intensively as you're proposed to do parking vehicles, in particular in the more intensive M and M1 districts, because I think the way it's being regulated or proposed to be regulated would be unduly burdensome on businesses. And I think that there's a way of doing that through permitted use structures and maybe site conditions, in particular with respect to screening, that would be doable and would protect the existing manufacturing and the existing dynamics between manufacturing and residential areas. So actually Mark, on his comments on Section 3.05, Article 3, Section 3.05, has some observations in there that I would concur with. And also, with respect to outdoor storage, that was a particular concern to my client, and I think others in the M district, again, that too, we would hope we could see that done as a permitted use in the more intensive M districts, subject to screening. And I hope that you'll take some of his comments under advisement, and I know I had said that I would get some comments into staff. I didn't have a chance. So I endeavor to follow up, and I hear that you're going to continue this to June 11th. So before then, my client and I will get you some commentary. That's it. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? It's your chance, Pat. No? All right. Then let's go to the commissioners. Again, let's just start with Article 1. Does everybody have that in front of them?
Just to interject really quick, Adam will have the language pulled up on the board, in front of you, the screen. So if we start discussing items, we'll try to
Good.
follow along.
That'll be
that
very
way.
helpful.
Dennis, can you please switch over to my computer? Thank you.
Article 1, introductory provisions.
Just to provide a quick summary on the specific article. Article 1 lays the foundation for the zoning regulations. It just establishes the purpose, scope, and guiding principles for the entire zoning ordinance. We heard comments related to some of the transitional provisions from the last meeting and during public comment. And then also we heard some concerns related to the planner's dictionary and the utilization of for undefined words.
All right. Commissioners, who wants to start comments on Article 1, introductory provisions,
Benny.
if any?
I'll start.
Good.
I don't have a lot of comments on this one, just two minor things. I was curious under section 1.13, paragraph A2. The first sentence reads, complete applications for special uses, variances, plan developments, and other zoning-related approvals that are pending approval on the effective date may, at the applicant's option, be reviewed wholly under this ordinance or the other, blah, blah, blah. It's basically saying when someone can apply under which version of the ordinance. And I was confused, when exactly is pending approval? Is that when they hand it in at the planning desk downstairs, or is that after intake review?
So pending approval is when we have a application that's in review and they've already expended funds related to the current zoning ordinance that's operating. We would provide them with the option of either being viewed under this ordinance or the old ordinance. If it's under the new ordinance, they may incur additional fees for additional reviews because we weren't reviewing it under the old, we're reviewing it under the old ordinance prior. It's just to provide them some flexibility, what best suits them in their requests.
Yeah, I think that's entirely appropriate. I just question, maybe we can be more clear on
Rewording it.
rewording it to be something tangible to the applicant, such as handing it in or getting some kind of written communication from you guys so that they can plan exactly down to the day. Because I know some projects are down to the day, like where they want, when they want to try to
Yeah.
hit a deadline, and they want to be able to know that once I give this into the planning desk, if it's complete and all the documents are there, which is a step. So maybe it can't be when they hand it in. Maybe you guys have to
It would-
review it.
I think my advisement would be to change it to be more of a, once the application is accepted, a complete application is accepted by staff.
Yeah.
Basically, that generates a planning and zoning case number at that time, and then it's officially under review.
Right, and then they still can't just turn in kind of a half-done
Yeah.
packet. Okay. The only other comment was that the first sentence of the next paragraph doesn't read like a full sentence to me.
Building permits?
Yeah.
Okay.
Building permits may be approved for construction or developments approved before the effective date specified and for developments pending approval under this section, even if such building, development, or structure does not fully comply with provisions of this zoning ordinance. Maybe I just don't understand that sentence.
I believe it's supposed to accommodate, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's supposed to accommodate when we have building permits under review, to just provide, hopefully to provide clarity for staff on how it's supposed to be reviewed at that time. So if somebody gets a permit that is approved, they can utilize that permit, but if the new ordinance doesn't really allow them to do what they wanted, they're still allowed to finish out the permit because it was approved, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's just strange wording for me. I mean, if other commissioners understand it, then I'll leave it be.
But it doesn't say if it's both, construction has commenced and been completed by the due date. If it isn't, then it has to come under the new.
Yeah, correct.
But it takes you 8 lines of word verbiage to say that.
Yeah, I think we can definitely work on rewording it. The transition particular sections are difficult because we don't have the exact date down yet for if and when it's approved. But we can certainly look at rewording it. That's not an issue. Just to clarify.
I think it's just, yeah, something at the end of it. If it does not fully comply with provisions of the zoning ordinance, may do something, because it's a hanging sentence. But I'll leave it at that. That's all I have for Article 1.
Anyone else have a comment on that?
I just had a question for Scott. On the split zone lots, was there anything in the existing code that referenced that, or is this something new? You don't have to look it up.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head regarding split zone in the current ordinance. I know we generally, I believe in the comprehensive plan, we mention it, that we generally do not want split zone lots because they're difficult to regulate.
Oh, I agree.
We wouldn't look at forcibly doing anything that are currently split zone because we do have a few in the village that are split zoned.
Okay, I was gonna ask.
The one I can think of off the top of my head is in the downtown, I believe it's the school property that is split zoned, or the bank, one of the two.
I don't ever remember anything about that in the code, so I was curious.
I believe Scott's right. I don't believe there's anything in the existing code about split zone lots. So,
That's all I had.
Okay, thank you. Village Attorney, do you have a comment before we move on to anything else?
Yeah, just a quick one. We had a resident, the first resident who spoke asked a question about who's going to enforce the ADU regulations. I don't want to forget about that, and I don't know maybe if we should answer that now so we don't
can.
forget, but because it might take a while before we get to the ADU section.
Yeah, that would be, it's in our accessory use section, which is kind of further down the line, so I'm happy to answer that before we get too involved. So ADUs are difficult to regulate in general when you're a non-home rule community. Those, we don't have the rights to regulate who can rent and who can be rented to as a non-home rule community. We just don't have that ability. The regulations that we have in place would also, is mostly to regulate the type and size of buildings and where things can be located. The provisions that we do have in the code that can help protect some of the impacts of ADUs include the nuisance provisions in our code. So if there's, and it's not in the zoning ordinance, it's a separate section of the municipal code regarding nuisances. So if there's a property that under the nuisance code qualifies as having a nuisance on the property, we can certainly have code enforcement investigate those type of things.
It would be code enforcement essentially that's
To verify it.
responsible for enforcing.
Correct, yeah.
And usually enforcement's done on a complaint basis. It's hard to see what's going on in ADUs, but they'd have to get permits, get built out, get inspected, and then once they're operational, if there's a complaint or if there's something that's observed, then code enforcement would do an inspection and enforce if necessary.
Additionally, I believe they had another question regarding garages.
Yes, ADUs above garages.
Yeah,
Would
we
you address
would,
that?
we would be able to allow it under what's proposed. As we mentioned in the last meeting, it's difficult to retrofit existing detached garages or attached garages to basically bear the load of the additional improvements, because usually they're not built as well as new buildings, and they're kind of bare bones, especially detached garages. So it's unlikely that they could retrofit it, not impossible, but unlikely. It'd likely be new builds, new detached garages that could accommodate it.
And I would think that the complications and expenses of an ADU over a garage would bring in exits and entries. The fire department would have additional requirements, wouldn't they, for something like that?
There's certainly all sorts of code requirements that would have to be met, plumbing facilities, all that sort of stuff would have to be met, and, so occupancy could be approved.
Yeah.
And I would just adding, if approved ADUs in general, there would be some growing pains for our processes between fire department, building, public works to see how we can utilize them. This just kind of lays the framework that if we do allow them, we have some rules and regulations in place in the zoning code to review it under.
I would think it would be along the lines too of a house that you would need like a structural engineer to certify that, you could put it above the garage.
Yep.
Yeah. Be cheaper to tear the garage down and build a new garage with an ADU on top.
Yeah, nothing in the zoning ordinance would not require anything you just stated. Most of that stuff's under the building regulations and how we review permits and building permits.
And if I know that we'll dig a little bit deeper into ADUs, but I know Kyle may or may not be here for the whole meeting or the next meeting if it gets drawn out. And if she has questions, then usually, a lot of other people might have questions. And since this is the zoning ordinance and we anticipate that the elected officials are going to be watching what we're doing, the approach with ADUs is it's kind of a new zoning thing for a lot of folks. Certainly, it's fairly new in the suburbs because usually you see ADUs being introduced. Really, kind of, there's a missing middle housing. There's kind of a need in an overcrowded area to find other ways to find ways to live. Out here in the western burbs, we like to think that the need is aging in place, extended family and such like that. So I believe that some of your concerns were, well, can you regulate renting to just anybody? And the answer to that is no, because we don't have home rule and we don't have those abilities. Does that create difficulty in maintaining those and it would be treated like any other rental. So we don't have direct rates to access unless a renter is making a complaint about, not having a utility or something happening inside. But usually we deal with that from the outside, or we can deal with noise or, other parking issues that arise. So staff looked at this as, well, the request was made, can we make these available? But as Scott indicated, it doesn't solve all of the questions on, is it easy to build them? And I believe that if you have an existing garage, was it built for those kind of structural loads where the foundation's built for that? Probably not. But it does give opportunity to someone that wants to build one. It does give opportunity to someone that wants to build one in their own home with a separate entrance and kind of like a little mini apartment in their own home. And the growing pains piece of it is, we do have building regulations, fire regulations. How are the utilities going to be run, especially if it's, to a separate building? Is it a separate tap? Is it a tap off the existing house? Not all that's figured out yet. Zoning is basically just saying for the use that it is a permissible request to do a deeper dive on. So hopefully that helps everyone that's watching. It was an excellent question. I'm just taking advantage of the question, so.
Yeah.
That also reminds me of the short-term rental. I know
Uh,
that-
it-
Sorry, okay.
Come to the podium, please.
ADUs kind of go hand in hand with short-term rentals, which I saw was mentioned in the last meeting as well. I don't know where you stand on short-term rentals right now, if it's still up in the air. Again, who's enforcing that? I feel like ADUs and short-term rentals are pretty similar, so I figured most of the questions you answered on that would go with that too. But both new to Westmont, so something to keep an eye on.
Do you have an opinion on short-term rentals, as long as you're there?
As long as I understand sometimes the need for it, like construction, maybe you need just to rent with your family for 6 months or so, but I don't think we want to get into like the Airbnb, VRBO thing. Westmont's a small town, everyone kind of knows each other. I really like that about Westmont. I think there's plenty of great hotels around here people could stay in, and that we don't need to do short-term rentals for that quick income for people.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we kind of got sidetracked into section 7, so let's return to Article 1. And, John, you're finished. Any other discussion, comments in Article 1? Okay, let's move on to,
Chair, just one quick question.
Sure,
sorry.
sure.
It confirms the map is the same map being confirmed with this ordinance as well? Or is the entire map going to be getting changed?
There is no proposed rezonings
Of any-
tonight.
okay.
If anything's approved, obviously, after village board approval of any of these text amendments.
Yeah.
As proposed now, if everything's approved, we would look at rezoning properties, but that'd take place at a separate public hearing.
Understood.
all right, thank you. Let's go on to Article 2, residential districts. Scott?
Yes, so Article 2 revises regulations for residential districts. That's your R1 through R6. So it's from single-family, attached housing, senior housing, and multifamily. The key changes are the inclusion of minimum lot depth of 120 feet, which is currently in our land development code, which is our subdivision code, a separate chapter.
120 or 125?
125. And that's just a transplant directly from that code. We have changes to the minimum lot width for detached houses in the R3, R4, and R5 zoning districts from 60 feet for minimum lot width to 50 feet. We have also changes that coincide with that in the R3 district to reduce the minimum setback to 5 feet. That integrates our existing easement requirements of 5 feet on each property, the side of a property. We have proposed eliminating maximum floor area ratio for residential properties. We have also changed the method in which we calculate density for multifamily, from being a bedroom count to a square unit basis or square footage basis of a property. There are no changes to the density minimums and maximums from the existing code. We tried to match it as best possible with the new calculation methods.
And do you discuss that final building height?
Oh, there are also changes to accessory building heights for the detached accessory buildings to 18 feet from 15 feet.
And that's a different article,
Technically,
correct?
it's in both sections, just because we listed in the bullet table. We
Okay.
would talk more about it in the accessory
All
use
right,
section.
understood.
Scott, did you cover FAR?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I wasn't paying attention.
We're not going to go to the public after each.
No, I would
Okay,
just,
so we did, okay.
That was just a follow-up because I wanted to make sure.
Understood, yeah. Trying to confuse myself. Okay, commissioners, comments on residential districts. We'll start with Commissioner Lynn.
Yeah. Like, from my experiences, that I found that, I've made this note times before, but that there's a combined, let me see. The combined lot coverage and building coverage. A lot of villages have separate building coverage versus lot coverage. When I say lot coverage, that's also another term for impervious surface, in a sense. So what I found in my line of work is that that by combining the two, it's really limiting to new single-family homes being built. I compared, and especially for corner lots. I did a comparison between, I did a comparison with a home that I designed at 102 South Lincoln Street here in Westmont compared to another home I designed in Elmhurst, which was at 316 Wilson Street. The house on Lincoln Street here in Westmont was 60-foot by 150-foot lot. So it was a bigger lot than the one in Elmhurst, which was 57-foot by 140-foot. The maximums of each, though, that the builder was able to build a house in Elmhurst that's about, I think it was like 700 or 800 square feet, 700 square feet larger than the home in Westmont, even though it's on a smaller lot in Elmhurst. There's a number of things, like with, say, the large setbacks in the Westmont code, and then also with the combined lot coverage and building coverage that leads then to a very small house. Or for not a very small house, but a smaller house relative to our neighbors' properties. In a sense, I've kind of noticed is that on a number of properties in Westmont, it's almost if a person wanted to build, say, like a 4,000 square foot house, which I know that's a really large house. Personally, I think that's an incredibly large house, and but there are people that want that. If they wanted that, they almost would have to turn to another neighborhood, another town, in order to build that. So I kind of saw that being kind of a handicap to Westmont, and of course there might not be that large of a demand for 4,000 square foot houses in Westmont currently, but of course if our zoning sticks around, if this zoning revision sticks around for however many decades or what, I would think that it'd be nice to allow for the future development of homes of larger sizes. Just to kind of give you an idea of like why that combination of lot coverage and building coverage kind of weird, like bizarre outcomes, is that, say, many homes today, many people today want a three-car garage on their home, but if they do a two-car garage, they could actually get more square footage for their house because now they have less, because a two-car garage would have a smaller driveway leading up to the house. And now that driveway for a three-car garage is actually going to take, because you have a combined coverage limitations, that wider driveway is going to have to take away from square footage from the house. So there are kind of gives and takes to it. Also, the larger setbacks of, I think it's is it 35 feet for the street side? Yeah, 35 feet in the R3 zoning district. That's because it's set back that far, and that's more so than other villages. In the comparison property in Elmhurst, it's a 25-foot front yard setback, and the corner side yard setback in Elmhurst, it's only 10 feet. And now that's, you might think, my gosh, that's too small, but that's for a home that's sold for well over $1 million. Do you mean it's not like a less desirable because of these setbacks? But that because you have 35-foot setbacks on both the front and corner, then that you're going to increase the amount of driveway leading to the house, which then because of the combined coverage limitations, then reduces the size of the house that it could be. So there's like a funny interplay between between the setbacks, the coverage limitations, and especially on corner lots. Corner lots are especially hampered by some of these codes. So that's something that in doing home designs before, I found that was, like I said, that kind of a handicap to the village. Maybe I'm probably repeating myself, and I apologize.
I'm gonna, for my newer commissioners, I just wanna, for lot coverage purposes. So, lot coverage includes any hardscaped portion of the property on a single-family home, or single-family lot, or other lots where lot coverage is in play. That includes things ranging from the building to the driveways, the patios, to decks, all viewed the same, regardless of pervious versus impervious. So lot coverage is lot coverage. In 2012, there was text amendments to decrease the lot coverage from 40% to 35% to mitigate some of the flooding concerns at the time. There were clauses made in the existing code to go from for administrative approval for properties that aren't located in known flooding areas generally to build up to 40%, but if they're not in one of those locations, they can only go up to 35% for the total lot coverage. In the proposed code, we aren't looking at changing it, only because it is coupled with a lot of our stormwater regulations because of those provisions. If we were to change it, we'd likely have to look at some of our land development code and stormwater ordinances so that we're not over encumbering properties related to stormwater, because that's the avenue they want at the time to reduce it. So with this, we're not proposing that change. Obviously, we'd look at it in the future. But with the text right now, we weren't proposing it.
Right. I hope it's considered, and thank you for that. Oh, sorry, did I interrupt?
No, I was just giving the background, and then I have a second thing I'll talk about in a second.
Can I?
Yeah, that I saw you.
So, because we take advantage of the fact that when we have a lot of new commissioners, so I apologize if I'm repeating stuff. But Commissioner Lynn is correct. Other communities sometimes do a breakout of your building coverage versus your overall lot coverage. Westmont has never done that, primarily because the drainage is so poor in Westmont. Using just one number is the way that they decided to go. So as much as planners like to separate themselves from engineers, this number that's in the code is really driven by a lot of engineering background. So what Scott was indicating, that when we approach this zoning ordinance rewrite, there are a lot of broken things that we're fixing, but to change that number and decide if we want to have a breakout of two different percentages, which is warranted for discussion, it would take a lot of engineering research based on, since 2012, when we made that decision, what have we done regionally? How have we improved the stormwater? Because, we've got alleys that are now built with very nice impervious brick or pervious brick. So it warrants a much larger study to say, should that number be modified? and we recognize that. We wish we could tackle that with this text amendment. It's going to be something that we have to tackle in the future.
Right.
And then I think Scott was going to speak specifically to setbacks. Am I
Yes,
correct?
So we had, I'm going to give this some background because between when we posted the language and the last meeting, there was a meeting with developers of properties for single-family homes where we were intaking information. I was not part of that meeting, but stuff came from that meeting regarding what you just stated about setbacks. So we did look into changing some of the language we do have proposed right now. And I don't know if Adam, if you're able to bring that up on screen, and this is for discussion, this is not what's in the proposed code, but what we would look at changing. Is it note 5, Adam?
Yeah, it's note 5 in the current drafted
Yeah,
language.
the proposed code. Under the bulk table, so it's under, what is it? Section 2.05, if you go under the whole table on page 2.3, there's table 2 notes and it's number 5. That states right now that the minimum street side setback is reduced to 25 feet and the minimum interior side setback is reduced to 5 feet for lawfully established and duly recorded corner lots in existence before the effective date specified in section 1.03, such as reductions are necessary to ensure buildable lot width of at least 30 feet. We do think it's worth discussion tonight to reduce some of the setbacks, and Adam, if you could read it directly from I just can't read it from here, the proposed.
Yeah, so for the proposed change, it would read as the minimum side setback is reduced to 15 feet, and the minimum interior side setback is reduced to 5 feet for lawfully established and duly recorded corner lots in existence before the effective date specified in section 1.03, if such reductions are necessary to ensure a buildable lot width of at least 40 feet. So that's a reduction in the current from 25 to 15 to allow the buildable width to expand from 30 to 40 feet.
And that's not, that's not a contextual thing, or is it? Or is that just is that for all the corner lots?
But yeah, this would be separate from contextual. When it's listed in the zoning ordinance, if I switch over to the setback section, you'll see footnote 5. It applies to the street side yard for all detached houses in all residential districts.
Okay, and that was what I was, I'm glad that went down to 15 on the corner side yard setback. Say for the front setback, is that still then 35 feet?
That one would be still eligible for the contextual setbacks. The way this footnote reads is that it's applicable only to the street side yard, so not the front street yard.
Yeah.
And then contextual setbacks for some existing properties would be for the front as well. So some of them could be built closer to a certain amount.
So can I translate that?
Yes, please do.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong. So that means the front yard could be a minimum of 25 feet setback if the contextual, the houses on either side allow that contextual to bring that house up closer to the street. So for my new folks, 35 feet is kind of the rule we established as front yard setbacks. I'm going to say it was in the 80s. But especially in these older sections of town, none of these homes are set back 35 feet. In fact, if you see a new build, you can see it's set further back than a lot of the older homes that are closer to the street. What we did a few years ago was we amended the code and said, well, if the houses on either side of you are as close to as 25, then you could match it. This new code kind of formalizes that in a better way and says it's a contextual setback, and basically you take the houses on either side and kind of take the average and you can bring the house up. So for the architects in the room, it means that you can get as close to 25 if the neighborhood has that condition already established. The side yard adjoining a street, which is usually these cross streets, it used to be 35. We allowed it to go to 25 with our old contextual provisions. This proposal would allow it to go to 15. So you did say in Elmhurst that you got to go to 10, so it's not as far as Elmhurst, but we are coming from 35 down to 25, down to 15.
Right.
So,
And additionally, and we will likely touch on it in the accessory structure section, things like porches are now able to encroach into that setback to a certain amount, but we can discuss that more as we get to that section.
and the last piece is, so why didn't we just do it really simply and say that side yard adjoining the street is 15 feet? Why do we do it as a calculation and say you get a minimum of 40 feet of buildable width? And that is because you will notice that in our old sections of town, our corner lots are exactly the same width as the other lots on the street, which are 60 feet wide. If we were subdividing today, those corner lots would be required to be 20% deeper. So 72 feet, is that my math? So basically, those lots would be deeper lots if we were designing today. But obviously, in the old sections of town, our corner lots are not deeper than any of the others. So if you have a corner lot that has a nice wide width, we don't necessarily want that coming to 15 feet because you've got plenty of lot space to still build. So we wrote it that way as it's based on how wide your lot is and based if you have a narrow lot that you are guaranteed a minimum of 40 feet of buildable lot width that way. So if I had a corner lot that was 100 feet wide, it doesn't mean I can build it at 15 feet from the side yard. It means that I'd probably have to maintain either that 25-foot or 35-foot setback because I've got a big lot. There's no reason to try to squash, close to the street, so.
I would mention those, and thank you, that helps with the 15 feet on the corner side yard. For the front yard setback being the 35 feet, for the combined coverages, I understand that there's engineering involved, there's permeability concerns and things like that, but that the 35-foot front yard setback kind of hurts you if the people are going to have driveways that lead to it. So now that's almost a way to encourage more impervious surface to get to a house. Whereas you could have had the house more forward to the street and a larger backyard for that the desire of more greater drainage. So that's something that I wonder if the large setbacks are also hurting us in the terms of the permeability of the town.
I think, any commissioner can jump in before I start talking. The thought with the contextual is because we really see in the older parts of town, many of the older parts in town have alleyway connections. As we slowly start to improve those alleyways, it would be thought that the detached garages would be from the rear, or attached garages could be accessed from the rear rather than the front. But I think your point has validity.
I think we have a very interesting mix of housing stock in Westmont. We have some stuff that's 100 years old, and we have some stuff that was built in 70s, 80s, 90s. A lot of those newer things, those newer homes, are at a 35-foot setback. So if we just across the board changed it to, say, 30 or 25, it could perhaps change the dynamic of neighborhoods. Now, most of those neighborhoods aren't at a redevelopment stage yet, and most people don't add to the front of their house. If it was built in the 80s, they add to the back or go up. But we could examine that if that's where we want to go with that. What you'll see reflected in this is we were trying to be hyper accommodating to try to address the old parts of town, which are the most difficult to build in, so.
Thank you all, sorry.
Okay, good discussion.
Can I ask for, before we move on?
Sure.
Is everyone amenable to changing that side yard adjoining a street, like Adam had read, to basically it would allow 15 feet instead of 25? Because that gives staff direction when we make changes to the draft for the next meeting. Is that something we want to do? Or I'll ask John, is that something we should poll for or something, I don't know. So-
Yeah, I think that's a good way to
Straw poll.
do it, is just a straw poll. Who's in favor of that?
I say aye.
Aye. Yeah, it makes sense to me, yes.
Yeah, I'm in favor.
Yes.
Yes.
Joe, did you?
Yeah.
So I think we had a unanimous aye to forward that. So I just want to make sure staff gets the right direction and we don't forget anything tonight, so.
Does anybody have any comments related to that in particular before we move on? Or anything else in the article too?
I have just a question. The contextual setback, is that limited to only structures that are built prior to the date of this ordinance?
I believe, and Adam, if you could go to the measurement section, sorry. That has infographics, so it's a little easier to understand. We take into account the two nearest lots on either side of the subject property, regardless of when it was built.
Okay. So going down a street, the houses could slowly creep towards the street and through time?
Yeah.
No? Okay.
Does,
I don't have any other questions on the setback.
yeah, I do. Yeah. Sorry, do you have more to say?
No, sorry, that was it.
Yeah, actually, with the contextual setbacks, does, like, to what authority does it have to be a surveyor then that cites those?
Generally, we have the ability, how we currently operate, because we do have something very similar in the current code. We will use basically two items. First, we just go to the DuPage County Parcel Viewer to get an eyeball view, because they have aerial imagery. What I usually do in these cases is to see if we have documentation internally for plats of surveys of those when they were built, or from previous permits to make that decision. Otherwise, we would probably ask for some verification from whoever's submitting the permit.
Okay.
And they can always discuss it with us too. And I'll note that the contextual setbacks also relate to building additions, not just new houses.
Scott, just from, I know we had this conversation before, and I think it might come to the benefit of the fellow commissioners. Is it better? Oh, sorry. We were talking about decks, and I'm looking through and I want to make sure that that's not gonna, it wouldn't be more appropriate at a different section, but as we're talking about the lot coverage, and the idea that even if underneath, let's say someone builds a deck on the back of their house, even if underneath that deck, it's permeable, we don't give them credit for that. So I just want to better understand, is this a time where we should consider incorporating that?
So I think it's related to the lot coverage general discussion that Commissioner Lynn mentioned. It would probably be better to discuss it then. I do know there were text amendments after 2012 because in 2012, with some of the amendments to the lot coverage section, we indicated that decks, I think permeable surfaces of some kind, like pavers, were viewed at 50% for lot coverage. So if you had a 100 square foot deck, we would only count 50 square feet of it as lot coverage in our calculations. That was removed from the code. And I don't remember exactly when that was amended. I'd have to go back and check and the reasoning behind it. But I would say with lot coverage, that's probably a general discussion. I don't know if we're looking at trying to change it today or with these text amendments. I think it'd likely be part of the larger discussion.
And I'd fully support that. My thinking is how many, if possible, how many decks have been built since we pulled it off? Because to me, if there's not that many, that wasn't what was causing the flooding. But I recognize there's a difference. If they're building it over cement, that's impermeable. But if they're building it over dirt and just putting the posts in concrete, to me, that's a benefit to the drainage it's stored.
We do run into a lot of times during permits with residential properties where they provided or built the deck in that time period, and they come in for a permit thinking it was under the one set of rules, so they can try to change it in some way. Generally, the policy has been they can remove and replace what was there, square footage wise, regardless if it's a deck or a patio. Currently, that's how it functions.
Scott, it was about 2020, so it's fairly recently that, so for years, we said that decks and permeable paver patios could be counted at 50%. So basically, the way we treated decks was, well, yeah, most of the water probably goes under the deck, but some of it does sheet off in a direction of your boards, and you could be aiming it at your neighbor. So that's where they arrived at this 50% rule. And they found over time it was just hard to navigate, especially if someone built it that way and then over time changed it to something else. So I think in 2020 that what the office was trying to do was kind of separate the engineering piece out of the intensity of how much you're developing your lot, which they said, well, no, a 35 or 40% intensity of zoning is okay, independent of this engineering piece that really is kind of integrated into where that number was derived. So they got kind of halfway to where they wanted to go. So when we do investigate the lot coverage and should there be a separate building coverage, I don't doubt that there will also be some analysis on what you're saying. Okay. So.
And permeable pavers as well. It's part of that same discussion.
Well, I'm sure it would be part of the discussion. The issue with permeable pavers is you can install them as permeable, and all it takes is a few years of not doing the right maintenance on them, and then they aren't operating that way any longer. So whereas a deck will probably stay a deck for quite some time, permeable pavers, I mean, because they have you put like gravel between the cracks of those, and you get plants that sprout up, so people go and oversand them and, try to fill in the cracks or do something to stop that. So permeable patios are much harder to guarantee a life of. But it will probably be part of that discussion as well, so.
Yeah, good point.
I'm sorry, which we're saying we're going to have this discussion later?
So we're not tackling that lot coverage number with this text amendment, because we got to bring the engineers in. They're going to say, is it time to do another stormwater survey, which hasn't been done for 20 years in the village, and what was the net effect of all the good we've done over the last 20 years? Does that mean that they can relax those numbers? I would love to say that it is purely a zoning number, but the fact that we have so many stormwater issues in this town, and that is how they chose to try to mitigate a lot of it over time. So that discussion will be probably targeted to that percentage and bring in all those engineers. So.
Okay.
And if and when that discussion happens, we would come back with text amendments to discuss it at planning and zoning, with likely looking at neighboring communities and the recommendation from the engineers.
Okay, that's fine.
Just a small point, but this is, I don't, is there anything about lighting, say, like, I sometimes wonder about the alleyways here, and say, it's just a thought of, like, say, any new garages to have, like, a certain amount of lighting that casts, to light up, help light up the alleyway. I don't know if that's something that's.
We're not proposing anything related to that in particular. We are instituting more lighting regulations. In general, it basically went from 2 lines to almost a whole section, 3 pages about. Okay. But we're not requiring the lighting. We're looking at more at mitigating effects of lighting than anything.
Did you have a further comment on lighting or?
There was, not, I know a builder that built in a subdivision. It was down in the south suburbs. I don't know, and this was a good few years, this was about 20 years ago, but the subdivision was put in, and they actually did not have street lighting. What they did instead is that they had a a code within whether the association or the municipality that each home to have a lamppost, and that there was like a code to say that the lamppost should turn on at a certain time of light. They could choose from 5 or 6 or a dozen different types of lamppost styles, and that was a way that they lit up the streets in the subdivision. Well, even though in some ways I kind of don't like the I almost see that as an overreach to kind of force people to put on power to light the streets, and I would rather that on the village's dime. But at the same time, I just can't help but see commuters coming home like in the dark, like when in the middle of winter, and thinking that Westmont has only like a street light once every other corner. It would be nice to get some more lights on the streets, or even more so at the alleyways and things. And I wonder, should such a similar strategy of like having if there's not, say, village lighting provided, should, say, new developments or what try to make up for that difference? So it's more of an idea. I don't know how often it's been tried. I could find out for you, of course, the name of that subdivision if you wanted an example to look at. I don't know it off the top of my head right now, but that's more of an idea that I could understand where, like, I don't, yeah, I guess that would be part of the zoning code changes, but I don't know if you guys have explored that, so, I mean, it's not.
Yeah, we weren't looking at it directly. I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not in the subdivision code very often. We have a separate section for land development when we subdivide, when there's a subdivision happening. Sometimes it can require installation of lights, I believe, with some of the required roadway improvements. Because the community here and just the makeup of the community, we usually don't see very large subdivisions anymore, where you would institute, brand new roadways everywhere and lighting standards and all of that.
Yeah, when I said lamppost, I meant like
Personal. Usually
personal, right.
usually we'll see that with HOA regulations. I would be weary of instituting the zoning code for
Me
new
too.
houses to require it.
No, I agree, and
I think that you're bringing up good points. Westmont, for many years, has been, I'm going to say, very proud that we don't have a lot of streetlights. What you'll see reflected in the lighting ordinances is what, as Scott said, trying to mitigate lighting, because there is a big surge of trying to be more dark sky compliant. I've seen what Commissioner Lynn is recommending. I see it like when you have a big townhouse development, like all the lights on the townhouses pop on at the same time. And that's really because the developer didn't want to have to do streetlights too.
Right.
It's a warranted discussion. I think it probably starts better with Public Works and Public Works Committee, because I think it's only if it's an acknowledgement that we want lighted streets, but the village is not willing to do that in a municipal way, how do you then accomplish that goal? So I don't want to say that we should recommend it in here. It is a good idea to just start discussing with the Public Works Committee, though.
Okay. I'm going to move on to Section 3, or Article 3, rather. Business and employment districts. Scott?
So Article 3, as the Commissioner stated, is business employment districts. This deals with the B2 general business district, C1 commercial, M manufacturing, M1 limited manufacturing, OR office research, and OR1, which is office research, limited office research district. We consolidated very separate sections in our code into a single article when they were all separate ones previously. We removed the B1 limited business district from the business district provision or article and moved into a separate downtown article, which is after the Article 3 section. We eliminated the supplemental street setbacks in our current code along major roadways, as some of the regulations for them were outdated And many of the properties don't abide by them, and we would see constant variances for supplemental setbacks on some of the roadways. We increased the minimum street setback in the B2 and C1 districts from 10 to 20 feet to accommodate the removal of supplemental setbacks along some of the major roadways like Cass Avenue.
Hey, Scott, can I interrupt on supplemental
Yep.
setbacks? Sorry to interrupt you. I don't know that everyone that watching understands what the supplemental setbacks are, so I just briefly want to touch on. Usually you have a front yard setback in one of these districts, so I believe our B2 front yard was 10 feet. But then those supplemental setbacks basically said, well, it's 10 feet, but if you're on Ogden Avenue, that's a much faster highway with a lot more traffic. 10 feet's too close. Ogden Avenue has a setback of 30 feet. So if I was a developer and I was trying to figure out how to build a new building, I would go to the table and I'd be like, oh, it's only a 10-foot setback, not reading a little footnote that said there's a supplemental setback that says if you're on this road, it's 30 feet. So what we're doing is we're eliminating that secondary footnote and basically trying to split the difference. So for example, that B2 district was 10, it would have been 30 if it was on on the main road, so that's where we arrived at the 20. And of course, all of our numbers, our consultant did look at what other towns are doing, is that comparable? So Scott and I use supplemental setback as a term every day, I just didn't know that everyone understood what that was.
The last change I just want to mention is we also have, I believe it's the removal of the FAR from commercial buildings.
Why was that removed? Is it antiquated, or it just
It was
didn't?
as recommended by the consultant.
Yeah, our view is that the FAR really wasn't serving the village's needs, or it really was much in line with sort of modern planning practices as we, look at other jurisdictions. Between the building setback requirements, the setback regulations, building setback regulations and the building height regulations, you've really defined the maximum envelope of building on the lot, and the FAR was just a kind of superfluous number that somehow connoted high science, but really served no real useful purpose in terms of real meaningful limitations on building scale in the village. So we thought the other regulations were serving that purpose, just an opportunity to eliminate a needless requirement from the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
I guess since Kyle's still here, I'm wondering about lot coverage versus FAR with regard to adding ADUs. That ADU subject is, would it affect the ability for any given lot one way or another using FAR versus lot coverage? Is that a?
I can take this. Sure. FAR in our current code does not include detached accessory buildings or garages or basements for single-family homes. It only includes basically the livable space in a house, is how we calculate it. The removal of it in the residential section wouldn't have an effect on ADUs. We have a specific restriction on the square footage of an ADU as proposed.
Thank you.
I'd have a question for the consultant.
Sure.
So I fully agree getting rid of the FAR on the residential. I don't have an issue with that. And I think the only reason why it's bothered me a little bit is I've seen where it's come into play in a nearby town for a commercial building. So for those of familiar where the Drake offices are in Oak Brook, next to the Drake Hotel, there was a limitation based on their FAR and the number of floors that they could build, but they're built almost on a berm. They got around it because they could walk out. Basically, their first floor is the basement, but it's not because it's classified as being in subfloor on one side. And so if we were to adopt this and get rid of FAR, that would be an example of where we couldn't restrict it. I don't think, it might not be applicable, and again, I'm one of the newer guys on the board, I'm just trying to understand that, in that scenario, that would be one where it would be supplemental or beneficial to the village. But barring that, is that really, and are there any other examples or, real-world examples you can give where you've seen this in commercial? Because I'm limited to where I think where it's built into a berm and you have similar to a walkout basement, but at a commercial level. What other scenarios would that ever plan for a FAR?
In a
Control with.
in a more suburban setting where we're not talking about buildings of great scale that, could be, 9, 10 downtown level, Chicago downtown level buildings. I've just never seen, I've never really seen it come into play in the way that, in the way that responds to your question. I just don't think the limitations, essentially across the board, the existing code limits the amount of floor area on the lot. Floor area, building floor area, principal building floor area in the lot to 80% of the area of the lot. And in doing so, it somehow implies that high math is a better way of establishing building scale rather than regulating the overall height and the amount of open space on the lot, from the setbacks. And so, again, for those reasons, we'd kind of recommended its denial. I see it used very less and less frequently in a more of a suburban setting.
Controlled more by height?
Yes,
definitions of
yes.
maximum height.
Yeah, I think it's a more predictable control on the scale of building that might occur on a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Can I interject really quick? We don't run into the issue a lot in Westmont when reviewing commercial properties from running into a maximum FAR issue. Only time it really comes into play is when we're looking at more residential or mixed-use buildings.
And we also can't forget, there's not just setbacks, landscape requirements, but we have stormwater requirements, which it's much cheaper to do it above ground, and then it becomes not buildable. And then we have our parking requirements, and obviously, if you keep going up, then you need more and more parking.
Yep.
And then the parking starts limiting the size of the development. So what Scott's saying, I've got a longer history with some bigger projects. We were never hitting the FAR maximums when you kind of factor in all those other development requirements.
Yeah, I guess you've been here a while. Has anyone come in for a variance on FAR for commercial?
I think the only ones I've seen on FAR were on residences.
So nothing commercial?
Yeah, so, and that's my
That makes sense.
recent memory, so.
Say for the B1 district, I see that it has, there's a front, that you're getting rid of the 5-foot front yard setback. I could understand if that was like a burden on it, right?
Can I interject really quick?
Go for it.
B1 is handled in the next article, so I don't want to.
Oh, that's all being cut out of this?
Yeah, we're removing it from the business and employment districts and moving into the downtown specific article. Yeah,
Okay, and we're gonna be,
we'll talk about, yeah.
right, awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else? Article 3? Let's look at Article 4. Downtown districts. Scott?
Yes. So Article 4 is related to downtown zoning districts. There's some major changes to this article and provisions in it. Most of it is new. So Article 4 provides detailed regulations tailored to the village's downtown and transition areas around the downtown. We're proposing 2 new districts, the B1A, which is the downtown core, bringing in the B1 limited business district, or downtown edge, as we would call it, and the R7, which is the downtown residential district. The regulations at play offer a more structured framework for establishing the proposed zoning districts. These districts are majorly designed to reinforce and enhance the downtown's compact, vibrant, and walkable character, while still trying to maintain the transition areas into those single-family homes that surround the downtown. Many of the changes being proposed here are related to, or come directly from our comprehensive plan and design guidelines. So getting into some of the specifics, I just want to mention before we start, we're not proposing rezoning anything tonight, as I already mentioned. That would come at a separate time, if and when approved with these changes. The allowed building types in this district, in these districts are categorized into 4 categories. One is storefront buildings. Those would be your buildings where you would see larger first floors, taller first floors with large windows. General buildings, which you can think of as more office-oriented, with mixed use or residential above, and then row buildings, which is residential, and detached houses that are currently scattered throughout the R7 district, or the R6 district, R5 district currently. The B1A would be oriented to the core of the downtown, near the tracks, is the thought. With the downtown core, we're proposing to increase the maximum building height to 5 stories, while the B1, which would be the downtown edge, as you progress out from the middle of the downtown along Cass Avenue, the minimum or maximum story height would be 3 stories.
Scott, can I interject?
Yes.
I had Commissioner Lynn, are we going to put the...
Oh, the map?
The map?
Yes, I think Adam has it on his computer, sorry. I meant to mention that before I started speaking.
And the reason the map's not in the, because we're not adopting.
Correct.
That map. But
It's just for reference.
It is for reference, so you understand.
Thank you.
Yeah, so on the left, you have the concept one, is just kind of generally what we're thinking about. Of course, nothing's being proposed tonight, it's just for thought. And then to the right is an excerpt from the comprehensive plan, which is what recommended these 2 districts.
And so I'll just briefly, so on the north side of the tracks, I believe the area that we would propose to be this B1A would go up to Irving, so basically the first 2 blocks. And then south of the tracks goes down to Richmond.
So the downtown core would be the 5-story building height maximum for new proposed buildings. And then the B1 or downtown edge would remain at that 3-story limit as it currently is in our code.
Is that the orange?
It would be the purple is the downtown edge. Pink is,
Okay.
yeah. And then downtown residential is that transition area, which is the yellow along Burlington and Quincy. Those would be proposed to be rezoned to R7, which would allow for the townhouse and general buildings to be built there. As we see scattered throughout there right now, it would allow those to be built. The other item with R7 is we would allow for those single-family homes that currently exist to continue to exist as non-conforming to a degree. The regulations for those existing single-family homes, they still are able to have improvements on their properties, decks, patios, that type of thing, and they be reviewed under the R5 regulations, which aren't proposed to change, and that's what it's zoned right now. We would just carry over when we do permit reviews, we'd look at the R5 if the property is a single-family home.
So all this will be rezoned once this goes through?
If we go through with approval of this, we would look at doing a village-initiated rezoning of these properties.
All at one time.
They would all be notified properly. They get mailings. We have requirements by the state and our zoning ordinance to notify. There'd be a public hearing just like we have tonight, but it'd be specific to those rezonings. This code is just laying the framework for those districts. As we've seen stagnated development in the downtown compared to surrounding communities, the general thought is if we're able to focus in on specific designs for the downtown and provide greater flexibility where we know we want and have had variances and large developments happen, we'll see those developments take place. A lot of times we get developers that come in looking at the downtown properties, and they're very limited on what they can do without requesting variances. One of the big things that we're changing in the current code, or from the current code related to Cass Avenue, is we're removing the minimum setback requirement and doing what's called a build-to zone. A build-to zone basically is where the building can be placed in relation to the property line. We want to encourage closer buildings to the street frontage rather than pushing them back farther, like we would see in single-family residential properties further into the downtown. We want to provide more walkability. We want to provide people a reason to keep walking in the downtown, so they're coming to that downtown to as customers and as residencies. A lot of times you run into issues where, and it's generally in the planning field, if you have large gaps in your downtown, usually people start to turn around. So if you have a large parking lot that's not serving the public, and it's serving a separate property or a vacant lot, people usually tend to turn around because they think that's the end of the downtown area. So requiring build-to zones rather than making the building set back where it looks like there's nothing to continue to look at as you walk further down is the reasoning behind the build-to zones rather than having a minimum setback. Additionally, many of the buildings in the downtown currently are non-conforming to our minimum setbacks. I would say a decent amount. We have setbacks in our code currently, not just minimum setbacks in the district, but also supplemental setbacks that push them farther from the street, which is somewhat non-intuitive to what you would typically see for a downtown. So this has very large changes. I'm happy to try to delve into it more. Other things I want to explain is we are also providing what are really design recommendations for certain buildings. So a large portion of this is design regulations in which we are providing information on. I believe we had somebody comment on, shutters, requiring different types of shutters. These requirements can be waived without variance requests. They're more of recommendations. If you're fulfilling what we typically want to see in the downtown, some of the regulations can be waived. Those things include transparency of buildings, so transparency on the first floor of a building. We want to encourage in the downtown core, but if they're achieving it in some different way, we're able to waive it to a degree. Some of the other design guidelines that are listed in the bulk tables in the section go through what can and cannot be waived. Some things like building height, if a building's trying to go up to 4 stories in the B1, the downtown edge, they'd still have to come in for a variance and would have a public hearing, and they'd have to prove that the uniqueness of the property is the reason they need it. In the downtown core, they're allowed to go up to 5 stories because we've seen that succeed in the downtown, and we've approved multiple times variance requests. It provides developers more security on their requests rather than producing a lot of money to propose a lot of things that we want in the downtown, but they have to come through with the risk of being denied those things. But we also want to keep in mind that our downtown is surrounded by single family, so that's why we're keeping some of the transitional pieces intact. That was a lot, sorry. If anything I missed, feel free, staff.
If it's all right, I'll put my spin on it. So a lot's happening in the downtown is what we want to say. So right now, we kind of have homogenized our downtown. It's all the B1. It treats it all the same. So whether you are close to the train or all the way up on Naperville, we have the same design regulations for any of the buildings that are there. So what we're trying to do is actually reflect the 2013 comp plan that said we should make these changes a long time ago that we never did. That basically said you should your downtown has a difference between some of the blocks. You should come up with specific regulations based on that. And actually, the comp plan, I think, said that what they considered the core actually down at Norfolk, not all the way up at Irving. But we're saying we kind of see it more up towards Irving. That's the second block, right?
No.
So what are we doing? So first I'm going to talk about the downtown itself, and then I'll talk about that residential piece of it. So the B1A is what we would call the core. That is your more intensive stuff. That is the first 2 blocks to the north and the first block to the south. So we heard a comment tonight that there was concern about the 5 stories. So basically, what we're saying, in that district, in what we consider the higher intensity district, we are raising the height to 5 stories. Now, notice we don't have a height in feet, because we do have what we consider a properly designed building usually has a much taller first floor, because people like high ceilings for the commercial space, and then the floors above it. So we're talking about stories. What we've learned over time is that we get a lot of requests, and sometimes they are 7 stories or more. But our code has always been basically about 3 stories. So whenever a developer approaches us and says, well, I want something taller than 3 stories, everything above that is basically a risk. It is, the village may or may not approve that. And they're very sensitive to designing buildings and paying for plans and going through planning and zoning when there's risk involved. So what we're hoping by bringing it up to 5 stories is we've established that the village is comfortable with 5 stories. Not 7, not 10, 5. So we hope that we get less and less variance requests, and they just meet what we have established ourselves as what we want the maximum to be. So the way it works now is they kind of throw something at us and say, what do you think about 6 stories? What do you think about 7? What do you think about 8? It's always hard for this commission and the board to say what's right. Because our code was way down here at 3, so what's right? So this is trying to say, we are establishing 5 is right in the first 2 blocks. Outside of the first 2 blocks, we're still calling that the B1. So why are we not changing that name? Because that is most similar to the current B1 code. It is still 3 stories. The other difference between these 2 districts is when you're in the core, in that intensive area, we have requirements that you have to have continuous storefront, nice big windows, because when you're in a good downtown, you want to look in the window and see what people are doing. If anyone's ever walked up the street, usually where you start considering turning around is when you hit the Bank of America parking lot. You know, it's like, should I really go down that far? You know, because you start losing that continuity of what is out there for me to shop at. You know, is there another restaurant down there? Most people don't see neat from, you know, where they're in the core. So that downtown core has a lot of requirements for continuity of those buildings. When you get into that B1 area, it starts allowing some of those parking lots to permeate, but it does have restrictions on how much those parking lots can permeate, because we still want to maintain some continuity there. The other thing that we haven't talked about yet is we have building types. So what are the building types? So basically, the buildings that are allowed in that more intensive core are what we call storefront buildings. So basically, they must have commercial on the first floor. They can be mixed use, they can have residential above. They can be fully commercial. I believe they can be fully office buildings too. When you get outside of that area, we start allowing what we call the general buildings. So what is a general building? That could be a 100% residential building. So we're starting to lose that commercial piece as we move away from the downtown, because we want to concentrate the commercial as close to the core as we can. And we have some of those buildings now. I mean, there's an apartment building just north of I think Norfolk, maybe, or Irving, I'm looking at you, Jill, because you know sometimes more than me, but there's an older apartment building that's there, exists in our downtown now, you know, so this starts allowing those general buildings, doesn't stop one of those storefront buildings from coming in, but it starts to allow fully residential buildings as you get further out. The other building type, and this is where I'll tackle the R7 district. So we've always recognized that the tracks are more appropriate for higher intensity multifamily. Now, I'm not talking about apartment buildings that are 10 stories tall, but, you know, row houses, something like that, townhouses. Right now, with the current R5 requirements that we have there, we have density requirements. It's hard to get many units on there. For those of us that were on the commission when we approved the townhouses across the street that never got built, density was a big issue there. So basically, row houses free up a lot of those requirements so that we can get some townhouse development over there. In fact, the R7 doesn't have a density requirement. Correct me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong.
it's based on form-based code.
It's form-based code. So what is form-based code? We want to see what your setback is, we want to see how tall you are, we want to see that you meet the minimum requirements. We are less concerned about what the actual density count is, as long as you meet the design requirements. So we think that will spur some of the development. We hope that the brick or the stone townhomes that are over here, more of that type of development along the tracks. The last thing I want to do is I want to tell you how broken our code is. So you heard Commissioner Lynn ask about a 5-foot setback. You heard Scott talk about setbacks. The actual setback in our downtown is 17 feet. There are virtually no properties in our downtown that are set back 17 feet. And so where do you get that 17 feet? It's actually a really crazy calculation that says we measure from the center line of Cass Avenue and go 50 feet out on each side. So I think probably the convenience store with the parking lot up front, that meets our setback. You know, maybe Tune before we, you know, got rid of it meets the setback. But our downtown, you want buildings that are at the sidewalk, and that gives you the kind of dimension that you want for a downtown. That is how broken our code is that when someone would approach Scott and say, I want to build a new building in your downtown, Scott would have to say, well, you need to set it back 17 feet. And we're trying to make this code developer friendly. So that is my watered down version of what we're doing. It is much more complicated than that. But that is how it helps me understand what we're trying to do.
Just want to note, one thing, I may have already said it, we have those design regulations in place, and that's to provide higher quality in the downtown. So we have design, basically recommendation and guidelines integrated into the code that could be waived if they're able to get either approval through here, or if the zoning administrator determined that they're meeting the requirement elsewhere on the building in some fashion, but they're still, maybe they're using a different type of stone or something like that, or brick. They're more in play for telling developers who are proposing things, this is what we want to see material-wise in the downtown. We don't want siding, we don't want low-quality materials. So I just wanted to mention that as well, but I'll let Doug, or the chair, continue.
I believe the comp plan says destination architecture is what we're trying to get. Destination architecture. We want people to come because it's a high-quality downtown. What Scott's saying is, although we are integrating it into the code, it can be waived. So that's very important to know for the developers. So it doesn't say you must build the building out of brick, and if you don't want to build it out of brick, you need a variance. It basically says, we want it built out of brick, or here's another list of all the high-quality materials, or this is how you can mix the materials. But ultimately, if we deem, and the board deems, that it's still a quality development that meets the intent of the district, it can still be approved. So right now, our design guidelines is what we use. There is virtually no enforcement. It's actually a separate document that says, here is how we would like stuff built. The code puts it front and center in the developer's hands when they start approaching development. It gives them flexibility on how to meet those minimums. But it does not tie their hands to they absolutely need variances if they have a different idea of what quality means. And what I mean by that, and the two architects sitting here will correct me, but a lot of modern architecture doesn't necessarily meet the traditional downtown standard, but it still may be destination architecture. It still may be very dynamic and very high quality. It's just, it's mostly glass and metal, or other new materials as they come out.
Those more design suggestions. Thank you.
Okay, I'm looking for a comment.
Nothing.
A lot there.
Scott, you mentioned build to setbacks. How can you define that? I can make a guess, but
If Adam can pull it up. So I believe it's each building type, and depending on the zoning district, there are what are called build to zones, basically where we want the building to be set. It's kind of the opposite of a minimum setback. We want it to be closer to the street in some fashions, sometimes up to 0 feet. So as long as they're in the zone, and if you look at the infographic, it's that hashed area. It's kind of hard to see on that one page Adam's pointing it out with the mouse. Those are the build to zones for buildings.
I don't know if perhaps this encourages or not, but that in the downtown district, in the B1, I should say, that I just wonder sometimes is that the sidewalks are very narrow, and I wonder it'd be nice to do like a build to, but a 5-foot setback or maybe 10-foot front setback. That's not a very builder-friendly thing, because I know that a lot of builders would want to maximize square footage, but and that's not, of course, for anything of the existing buildings. That say there's a good few vacant parcels or that are underdeveloped spots between Norfolk and Naperville. I just wonder if they were to build a new building, it'd be almost nice to have a little bit more sidewalk available for it. Now, that's technically on their property, so I don't, with the Quincy Station here, they did a setback, of course, but that was more to provide themselves with balconies above, which I understand. But then the sidewalk is extended to that into that setback that they kind of provided. So I was just wondering, is there anything that kind of encourages more width to the sidewalks and along Cass Avenue?
My initial reaction would be, if we were to do that, we'd have to look at increasing the build to zone for some of the building types and districts to accommodate that, which we can certainly look at doing. Right now, for the downtown core, which is the more intense buildings, we have 0 to 5 for the build to zone for those front property lines. We could look at increasing it as well. For the B1A and the B1, so the downtown edge and downtown core, for storefront buildings, that was for storefront and storefront buildings of the downtown core and downtown edge. We also have, for general buildings, the building type being general buildings in the B1 and R7 are 5 to 20, and then 10 to 25 in the downtown residential area, because they're residential properties, so it makes more sense to have them set back a little further as you transition to single-family homes. But we can certainly look at increasing that in certain areas if that's the direction.
So I think you're starting to get into what the village is doing separate of the zoning ordinance. So we don't have a downtown plan. Amy Reese with Public Works has been tasked, and Community Development will be working with her on how to come up with a downtown plan. So what I heard you say is that some of our sidewalks are pretty narrow. Now, a downtown plan would set up rules and regulations such as if you're to, so if we said, the village needs an extra 10 feet, 5 feet on each side, so as projects develop, we should get another 5 feet of right-of-way. The downtown plan would formulate that kind of model, if that's what we want to do, because the danger is that we can ask for an additional setback, but that doesn't guarantee that it is a benefit to the street. It doesn't guarantee that the sidewalk would be widened.
That's true.
So if that was truly where we wanted to go, it would be more prudent to come up with a plan that says, this is what our plan is. So even if every mid-block, we said we wanted an extra 10 feet when those properties develop, because we want to do a nice crosswalk that comes through, and on each side of that crosswalk, we want nice plantings and we need extra space. That downtown plan is where we'll have those discussions and figure out how we want the downtown to develop. And if that downtown plan says, you know what, we want to come up with a plan to try to push the buildings back, but we don't want to take the extreme step of trying to get more property, we can always come back and amend this. I would just caution that if we do it now, before the downtown plan is done, then we're kind of driving a plan that we don't know how it will end up.
Sure.
So the beauty of a zoning ordinance is, even though we say we haven't done this in almost 50 years, we do modify the zoning ordinance quite often. It's just we don't modify it comprehensively like we are in this process.
Thank you. It's not only just for maybe increased sidewalk width, but sometimes I think too that even commercial buildings would, I think it might help the design like of the buildings if there was a little bit more indulation in the facade, where if there was, it's a very traditional idea, but like to have bay windows come out on the second floor of like a commercial building or different thing, like to have a bit more articulation or larger or roof overhangs that come out and different things that that it wouldn't be, I mean, I know it's a classic American clean cut, like straight flat facade, like a, what do you call it, like Michigan Avenue, the street wall, but sometimes if the buildings are set back, but it's still their property, so then they could allow for different cantilevers and different things, then that might actually, I think that could be visually appealing too. Now, that, again, I understand that's not for this, that's more for your downtown design that you're talking about. Is that going on at the same time then?
Well, I believe that we have not gone out to RFP, RFQ yet, so, but it is in the budget to start that process.
And are they working with, because that's something I was concerned about with this, are they working with urban designers? Because I would like a design, because I do architectural work, I don't do, say, urban design myself, and so, but I would almost trust the eye of an urban designer to kind of get involved somehow with some of this, especially the downtown.
I think at this point, they're just putting together the RFQ on how they're choosing the consultants, so it's way too early for me to try to answer that. But it's being spearheaded by Public Works, but Community Development will be an integral piece of that. And usually those are somewhat of a public process, just like what we're doing here, so.
Okay. I could keep going if you want. But
I just wanted to mention one thing related to some of the articulation, architectural features. Some are listed in the designs we're providing here. It gives like infographics and examples. We have some regulations related to shadow lines, breaking up the building a bit, staggering it, that type of stuff.
Yeah, but if the building is built up onto the zero lot line, then they can't really reach out, they can't cantilever past.
Correct, yeah.
So that's,
Yeah.
right, that's
We
why.
wouldn't accommodate something like that.
Right, that's where I'm thinking articulation of a greater depth but then that would require the whole building, the base of the building to be set back. That's just an idea.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I could keep going. I'm sorry, but maybe with the different districts, like the B1 district, and looking at the map, I kind of think, I know that it stops just north of, maybe like 3 properties north of Naperville, but I would almost imagine, or like at least driving up to, say, the library often, there's a whole lot of vacant parcels that are considered, I guess, the R4 general residence. I just, when I see that many vacant properties that, like, and that's north, yeah, going up, say, to the library or so, that just makes me think that there's the zoning doesn't make them appealing to developers, those could also be a pretty good spot to do multi-unit type of buildings, like probably not storefront on the ground floor, but just the fact that there's so many vacant pieces makes me think that there's a problem with zoning. A builder would normally want to buy it and make some money on it, so.
I'm going to state 2 things, and it's generally just for the discussion. When we're looking at lines on the map that was provided, those are just general indications of where we're thinking for it. Nothing's permanent. Some of the discussions we've had in the past regarding the downtown, we kind of went in the direction of playing map maker, is what I like to say, and showing properties downtown increasing in size. That is a discussion for the comprehensive plan and not the zoning ordinance. Could even be a discussion during rezonings, but we don't want to look at changing where the downtown lies currently in those downtown residential areas with the discussion tonight. A lot of those properties north are zoned, I believe it's R4, which is somewhat of a transitional zoning district for multi-unit developments. It does not allow as much density as the R5 district that we currently have. With the items here, we're not looking at changing that. In particular, we also just recently had discussions on density for the R4 district just at the new year, where we changed the density to increase it. But I agree with you that it is an issue related to vacant lots in that direction.
So what you're bringing up, that's comprehensive plan. And actually, we have money in the budget that once we adopt the zoning ordinance, we then will move forward with updating the comprehensive plan. That actual area that we know that is going to be an up for debate and up for discussion piece. Our comprehensive plan was not well done for redevelopment. It was kind of treated as if it was all new development, and some of our areas haven't flourished like we would have hoped. In fact, I think our comprehensive plan, in particular in that area, says it should be commercial, but it's zoned residential, which is part of the confusion the developers have had is like, what do you want it to be? You have it zoned as residential, but your comp plan says commercial. And I think at one point we thought that the commercial would go all the way up to Ogden, and maybe that's probably a bit of a lofty goal for that block, because we saw a lot of great success with those townhouses that got built. And we get a lot of inquiries for that kind of development up there. So basically, what we're doing here is we're trying to say that the existing downtown B1 will be split into 2 zoning districts, or 3 zoning districts if you look at the residential. Doesn't mean that the comp plan won't come forth and say, actually, those districts should be further. But that will be the next thing that we tackle. There's a lot of updates, especially, just before COVID hit, the Amazon era hit, and kind of retail was retracting. A lot of communities are looking how to densify to support the businesses that are in town. Those will all be discussions with our comprehensive plan update, so.
Thank you.
All right.
I have some comments or questions. On page 4-5, where it's talking about, well, I guess my first question about this section is The introducing building topology and form into permitted uses within zones, I think you've done a pretty good job of describing and showing example photos of these three different building typologies. Who gets to decide in the end? I'm assuming it's you, the village. What building something? What if a building is in between these topologies? What if it doesn't fit neatly between one or the other?
You're looking at me, but I'm going to look at the consultant.
I may have the consultant jump in as well, but the building types, the topology, are broken up into what we would like in those separate districts. So we have general, storefront, resident, or row homes. The determination can be up to the zoning administrator about what we think that building type is ultimately. It would have to fit into that definition or regulation, how we describe it. It has the bulk table regulations it would have to abide by depending on what type of building type it is. Ultimately, we do have the ability, when through site plan approval, to have it come to the commission for final approval, or for recommendation for approval and final approval of the village board.
Okay.
It is somewhat uncoupled with permitted uses or principal uses. That's a separate section. So a storefront building may be able to allow other types of uses as special uses. It doesn't have to be retail in particular. Obviously, it's more geared towards those type of uses based on the topology of the building and what usually we see with retail and restaurants, what they're looking for.
Is this something do we know if adjacent communities have this kind of topology built in to their downtowns?
I know for the distinction between downtown core, downtown edge, and downtown residential, Downers Grove has developed like that when they introduced their new zoning ordinance, I believe decades ago.
Okay.
We have other communities in DuPage County where it's broken up like that, and it helps spur some more development. Other communities, it was always done like that. We instituted the B1 district after the fact for the zoning ordinance, so. I don't know.
I mean, I think it really helps clarify what the village is after, like in each individual area in terms of building form. I think it's a really good improvement on the downtown specifically. I just wanted to go over a couple numbers and maybe critique or question them. So on page 4-5, districts B1A and B1, the upper story height maximum is listed as 11 feet. And I think that might be a little too low. And what I'm thinking about the scenario is like a mixed-use building or a primarily residential building with penthouse amenities, either a penthouse suite or communal amenities like a terrace and a amenity room and spaces that might need higher ceilings. By the time you put a drop ceiling in and mechanical and structure and all of that, having a limit of 11 feet would probably get you to, at best, a 9-foot ceiling for a rather large space that could end up being at the top story of one of those kinds of buildings. So I would recommend increasing, we have the overall height limit. I don't see the harm in increasing the upper story limit to something more like 13 feet that would allow assembly type uses on the top floor of such a building. I also want to say on the next page at the very bottom, number 17, where it lists vertical division with shadow lines every 60 feet. I think it's great to have this requirement. I think it can be much shorter span than that because the materials that we're talking about, like masonry, for example, needs expansion joints anyway. The material capacity is just leaning itself to something more like 25 or 30 feet. And I don't think it's asking much. 60 feet is a long distance to not have a vertical shadow line. And I don't think it's asking much of a developer to incorporate something on a more regular rhythm than 60 feet is my
Can
opinion.
I ask a question?
Yeah.
Would you say that for the B1A and B1? Or,
I would say that, yes. I would say that for all three of these building types, you wouldn't want to see something without vertical striation. 60 feet is just a long distance for no vertical striation of any kind. Sorry, I just had to flip through here. On page 4-8, for districts B1 and R7, the side setback, the minimum side setback is 5 feet in it's 10 feet in R7, but it's only 5 feet in R4. And I would think that R7 would be denser than R4. So I'm questioning if that's the right number or if it should match R4.
I think depending on the R4 location, we have other regulations. So if a building's going higher, providing more bedrooms and dwelling units, they have to increase their setbacks for multifamily in the R4, because the R4 allows kind of a plethora of different building types, single-family homes included. So when you get to a certain height, I believe we have increased setbacks, but I'm open to that discussion as well for reducing it.
Yeah, even in R3, it's 5 for an interior setback line. So that number stood out to me. I'm questioning that if that number is right. And I guess I would also question, I'm not as uncomfortable with this, but for your row type building, the first floor limit is 12 feet. I could potentially see office functions going into a row type building, and they might want to have a higher ceiling as well. They might want to have a 10-foot or 10.6 ceiling or 11-foot ceiling. So I'm wondering if that's too restrictive for the row building typology as well on the first floor.
If I, just really quick, I don't believe in the R7 district, we would permit or allow a office to be a principal use on the property. Home occupations is a different discussion. I don't think we're looking at allowing it for row buildings particularly.
Sure, but it's listed B1 and R7, so
Yes,
this could be a
correct.
row district going in B1. So maybe we separate those two out if we need to. Page 4-14 is talking about building design and major facade materials. There's a clause that says side and rear facades not visible from any street or civic space may use an approved minor facade. What do we really mean when we say not visible from a street? Because I don't understand how I could not see the side of a building at some point as I'm walking down the street, since there's setbacks and everything. So what are we really trying to say? And how can we be more precise with when we are going to allow this minor facade material? I mean, I think it means when it's not prominent, but it's hard to define that.
Yeah, I think it could use some rework.
What paragraph is that, Tom?
That was
4.12
paragraph B,
B2C.
yeah, B2C,
B2B.
right in the middle of the page. So I think we should work on clarifying that exception. Page 4-16, when it's talking about minor and major facade materials, it's listing them out as allowed, or, what is allowed where. Under glass, G, curtain wall, we should add curtain wall is a type of glazing assembly. There are other types that we would not care if storefront was used or window wall was used. These are different typologies of systems. So we should either just remove the word curtain wall and just say glass systems, or we should add these other systems that would technically be functionally the same. I think that's all I have. Yep, that's it.
Thank you. What architectural term did you use for building form or building types?
Typology. Is that-
Typology?
Yeah. I did have one more thing, sorry, I'm skipping through. So page 4-22, where it's talking about visibility through glass. I just double-checked the nomenclature here, where we're saying minimum of 50% transmittance factor. That's usually called visible light transmittance. Architects are used to that phrase, and additionally, visible light reflectance, or exterior visible light reflectance. That's kind of the standard industry terms for those numbers. The numbers seem fine, just the terms. That's it.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Article 4. It's 8 o'clock. I'd offer if anyone wants to take a 5-minute break and get right back to it. Speak. Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed. And a little unusual, ma'am, I saw you came later after public comment was completed. And Brian, you did too. Would either of you like to quickly come to the podium, identify yourselves, and address the commission? Okay. First of all, raise your right hand and say that any and all testimony you give tonight will be the complete truth.
It is, yes.
Thank you. Now, sign in and give us your name.
I signed in out there, do I need to sign in?
You're already signed in. Okay, thank you.
No problem, awesome. Anyway, I appeared to you before, I just had a quick addendum.
Your name,
Sorry.
Russ.
Brian Schuring, I live at 5719 Buck Court. I appeared at the previous meeting and I had 3 suggestions, which were, one was to consider eliminating the parking mandate if the lower parking minimum requirements prove successful in our aims, creating an express permitting process for accessory dwelling units, and then lowering the minimum lot size to conform with the new minimum lot widths and depths for each zone. One other suggestion I just wanted to tack on was, right now, it looks like it says ADUs, the maximum height is either 18 feet or the height of the main unit on the property, whichever is less. I would suggest maybe considering raising that to 20 or even 22 feet, just to allow for a little more range of designs, especially on smaller lots. I was playing around with what you could do with 850 square feet, and on a narrower lot with just a little bit more clearance, you could have 8-foot ceilings that are up to code, and then you could potentially do like a smaller, narrow 2-story one. It's something to give a little more. I was saying to Scott in my email, I think ADUs are kind of like solar panels where people understand the benefits in the abstract, but until you can talk to your neighbor and ask them, how did it go? What was the process like? How painful or painless was it? We're not going to see that growth. So if we can make it as easy as possible for the early adopters and just give them the most leeway in terms of design, I just think that would be a good thing. But that's all. Thank you all, and I'm looking forward to where the zoning's going. So thank you for all your work.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
May I just interject really quick?
Absolutely.
Just because we passed a section already related to lot area. You'll notice, and as was mentioned, lot area for the change in residential property. So we're reducing the width for the some of the R3 to R4 and R5 properties to that 50 feet and reducing the setbacks to 5 feet. We aren't looking at changing the area from our current code to basically be a ratio or a to equal the exact amount from, if you multiply 50 feet by 125, we're now looking to make that the area, which is the minimum. The thought is that if we're having decreased width, we still want to maintain a certain amount of area for them to have the buildability on the lot. So they're not running into issues for building a single-family home on the property. Our current code does not work that way. So our 60-foot lot width minimum in our current code multiplied by 125 of our lot depth does not equal our current amount for lot area. And it's to help prevent overdevelopment in single-family neighborhoods, really. Anyway, that's all I wanted to mention. And then he did provide comments via email that should have been in your packet.
Yes, we all read those. Okay, let's move on to Article 5, Special Purpose Districts.
All right, Article 5 relates to special purpose districts. The special purpose districts are those special purpose zoning are zoning related districts and uses related to, that don't fit neatly in our current zoning code. So right now, proposed in this article is the B3 district, which is largely a single property in the village. It's a resort-oriented zoning for that property. It has very special regulations that are largely being carried over from the current code. We are introducing a new district called the Public Institutional District, which is in particular to help accommodate some of the governmental uses as well as institutional uses like schools. In this article, we also outline the proposed change from planned developments to planned unit developments by removing planned developments, which is an outdated term. Planned unit developments would have a special use process attached to it, and it would allow for more creativity with the land as outlined in that section. Again, related to some of these new zoning districts and regulations, we are not looking at rezoning properties today. Likely what would follow for the public institutional district, the PI district, we'd look at rezoning some village-owned properties if it was approved as shown after the fact, and there would be a public hearing regarding those rezonings as well. I believe that is largely what I have as a short list of those changes. A lot of the planned unit development structure of how those are approved are in the administration section in the zoning ordinance.
For the PI district, I know the village is a separate entity, and as far as these other ones, are they going to be required to?
No, we would not be looking at requiring them if, and you're talking about, let's say, park district properties, school district properties.
Yeah.
We wouldn't require anything. We would work with them if they do want to rezone, as those would be primed rezone properties because they have uses that are public or institutional, really uses. We're not going to be forcibly rezoning any of their properties after the fact unless directed to. It would be largely on a if they're proposing something new, a new park, we would look at seeing if they could rezone to the properties to a PI property or zoning district. Because the PI properties are meant to be scattered throughout the town, but to accommodate some creative structures like parks have gazebos, they have swing sets, they don't have a primary building usually, which is difficult in our current code to accommodate. So, no, we wouldn't look at those other districts and institutions.
Can I, basically, we would handle it very similarly to how we do now. So if you remember a few years ago, the Park District was trying to do a lot of improvements on different parks. And we're like, oh, those parks were established before they got a special use. So at the time that they approached us, we said, okay, this is the time for you to establish your special use that you never had. So in this case, we'd say, this is the time for you to rezone And the benefit of rezoning is, rather than asking for 3 variances because you have 5 little buildings on this park, and you need variances because we don't have that ability to do that in our code, you just rezone to the P district, or the PI district, and then it's much easier for you to process the things you do on that piece of property. So that's really the intent of what it is.
Yeah, and to add on to what Joe said, many of the uses allowed in the PI district are still allowed in some capacity in other districts, especially in residential. So that wouldn't say that creating this district means that they're no longer allowed elsewhere. It just means that they want to come in and do something, they might want to take advantage of this rezoning, because it might be easier for what they want to do with the property.
Have any of the uses, have we allowed for any other uses in any of these districts? It's a little hard, I know, because it's on there, but would it be the
Yes.
same way where it'd be struck out or bolded, or has anything been changed on this?
So the PI district, if you go to the principal use table on page, what is this, 6.2 and 6.3, the last green column is the PI districts and what uses would be allowed. Most of them are still special uses, and those would be for newer uses being proposed on a property. Some are permitted uses. The example I give for permitted uses in that district relates to neighborhood parks. Usually neighborhood parks aren't the parks that have programming at them. They don't have baseball, they don't have baseball fields or football fields or the like, or where parking lots are normally at. And we spoke with the park district in particular to make sure our definitions match theirs. Those would be permitted in those neighborhood areas because the idea is that neighborhood is going to use those parks. People outside that neighborhood usually aren't going to use those parks. Those program parks would be special uses as our current code currently dictates for a lot of the residential zone properties. So a lot of it's carryover from what our residential code allows use-wise. It delineates more some of those governmental uses. It breaks it out a bit more. So they're not just, we have like libraries, governmental uses, in particular hospitals, safety services, rather than just all of it being listed under governmental uses. But generally, most more carryovers that were allowed in the R3 district in our current code.
Understood. Is I guess I don't want to, I'm not trying to draw an error if that's what it is, but if you look on page 6-2, and you go just like 5th line from the bottom where it says entertainment, spectator, and you look at outdoor, the difference in the size of the S's.
font?
What I'm trying to do is one, what it was, like are all the bigger ones what's already there in existence today, and the lower ones are what we're changing it to?
No, I think
Or-
that's a
Got it, it's
a
just
font
okay.
issue.
So nothing else in terms of use for any of these has changed except for the PI stuff?
Generally, there are some uses, and we'll get more into it for the other districts in particular.
Okay.
Once we hit the section, we'll go through some of those changes, but for the PI district, because it's a new district, technically, there are new uses in general being allowed in certain areas, depending on the zoning. Obviously, we don't have any properties zoned that currently.
Okay.
So I can give you a distinct answer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely, thank you.
Do other municipalities have a district like that?
A lot of many municipalities do, especially in the Chicagoland area, and it's to accommodate mostly when uses have campus-like structures. You'll see this instituted because they're institutional uses.
For those of us that have been around a while, if you remember, Bob Gleason was trying to propose a no zone for many years, and that no zone was to serve the governmental uses at the time. And what it was basically establishing is that to provide services to a community, sometimes you need facilities that don't meet the exact requirements of the district they're in. So for example, we just did, we're doing the new water tower up by the high school. Well, that's zoned R3, that's zoned residential. It only has a 35-foot height maximum. So it requires the municipality to go in and ask for a variance to height. Now, it doesn't absolve a municipality or a church or, one of these uses that's allowed there from any requirements. It just makes it more geared towards the fact that they're providing services in our unique uses. They're not usually, I'm building one building and I can meet all the setbacks and I'll provide the parking because we're going to have customers, because they usually don't have customers, they just have employees. And you try to insert them in different places in your community that weren't necessarily built for those type of buildings. So this makes it more streamlined. So the Park District will be very happy because we have strung them through a lot of processes here and put like residential standards on their Taiwan or Park or, you know, something like that. So it remedies a lot of that. And although I don't know that it is widely popular here on, you know, the Midwest, when I was in the West, institutional districts, public, quasi-public districts were fairly the norm out in the West, so.
We did discuss PI district previously at a discussion with the commissioners, and I think CDC as well, which is our Community Development Committee. We did allow for greater intensive structures on the building, so the bulk standards like increased to allow greater height and that type of thing from what we last discussed. So as directed.
All right, let's move on to Article 6, principal uses. Staff?
Yes. So Article 6 regulates principal uses on private property. It defines land usage within a specific zoning district by listing the use as either allowable, permitted, or special, or as allowable, as either permitted or special, or not allowed or prohibited. The uses themselves are grouped, are classified into groups, categories, and subcategories with supplemental regulations and special conditions for specific uses that we deem have greater impact usually, and we want to wrangle them in a bit. The goal with the new uses and how they're listed is to provide greater clarity from our current zoning code. So a lot of the existing permissions in the zoning code are carried over. Obviously, we have new districts, so there are some changes to it. Largely minor in nature. The replacement of basically outdated and overly detailed uses, and we're categorizing what we call baskets rather than specifically calling out uses. We're carrying over a lot of the supplemental regulations such as distance requirements for specific uses. And then we're just enhancing the use table itself so it's able to be handed out to the public and provided all on basically 1 or 3 pages. Currently, the code has it, I believe, in like 6 or 8 different sections.
Is it open to comment?
Yes, open to comment.
My only, sorry, if this is in regards to this table, like the,
Correct.
I was a bit confused at the beginning when I was expecting to see the ADUs in this table, but I understand that it's on another part of the code. I just wonder, should ADUs be added to this, or like?
We can certainly institute them. They're considered accessory, so that's within their accessory use section under their own regulations.
And that they wouldn't be, because they're not,
Principal.
yeah, they're not, because they're not principal, then they don't allow, okay, I
Yes.
get it. I just wondered if, like, people would be lost looking, like, expecting it in this table, like, but,
We generally advise our clients not to attempt to include accessory uses in the table because there just are so many
yeah, there could be more.
types of building structures and uses that are classified as accessory or ancillary, that it implies, by putting a few rows in the table, it implies that that's a universe of allowed accessory uses. So in our view, having a separate article for accessory uses with some general language saying this isn't the entire universe, and then to call out those that are major accessory uses in nature is probably a preferred approach. But we do frequently get questions like, well, where's the ADU row? Because people think of that, well, it's a use for most people. As planners, we kind of have put them in little categories, but that's the reasoning behind it.
Sure. Are ADUs allowed in every R district or no?
They are allowed on lots containing a single detached principal dwelling unit. So a detached house, any lot that's allowed a detached house or has a detached house can have, as proposed, an accessory dwelling unit, regardless of the zoning. In most cases, it's going to be an R zoning, yeah. Yeah, in all the R districts.
Thank you.
We did have comments related to this from the public at the previous meeting related to manufacturing district and additionally how we have a criteria for classification of uses that's listed out on page 6-5, 6.02D. It lays out how we classify uses internally. So what does that mean for the commission? Not a lot, but when we deal with businesses trying to find location in the village, they usually call us, and we have to determine based on our list of uses what use that is. Sometimes they have hybrid uses on a property, meaning they have different uses taking place on the property. It's not easily categorized as a single use. So we have provisions related to hybrid uses and then just general authority about how we determine a use and where it fits. Now, if a applicant or somebody we're talking with doesn't agree with that use determination, they have all the ability to appeal that decision through our appeals process and come before you for that decision. But I just wanted to mention that for the classification of uses because we did have comments on the previous meeting. In the manufacturing district and industry uses, we had some comments related to allowing principal use for outdoor storage yards, I believe it was. We aren't currently instituted in this code because in our current code, we don't allow it. So we were carrying over what those uses were in the previous code. The idea behind the use table itself is just to provide clarity for those businesses trying to move in and developers in general. We're trying to keep most of the uses that are currently in the zoning ordinance and just carry them over as best possible. Are there any particular uses anybody would like to discuss and where they're allowed and not allowed? It's a very large table, so.
Scott, I have one. I don't know if it's controversial, and I know one of the residents brought it up before, and I've dealt with it frequently with the surrounding towns. Has the village given any indication or the new administration what they're looking for in terms of short-term rentals? If they're looking to take a position? I'm kind of basing, if this is all carryover, it leaves it a little ambiguous saying 30 days or more.
So,
Hotel, but not defined otherwise.
we did bring it to a community development committee meeting for discussion. We did not we were asked not to delve deeper into short-term rentals in general. We do have lodging uses particularly outlined in here. Those are your hotels and motels outlined in this chapter, and it's shown in the principal use table. But
So Scott, correct me if I say this, and I feel like I might say it incorrectly. I believe the direction that we were given was, we don't wish to regulate them at this time, so we don't want an expressive allowance or denial, that they can't exist. We don't have anything in particular to say they can or can't exist. And that was after discussion, did we want them in our downtown? Do we want them in residential? And the CDC discussed it at length, and I think we maybe had a discussion topic here about it probably before you were sitting on here. But the direction, we thought we would land on you want them or you don't want them? And the answer we got was, in Westmont, they really haven't percolated to be an issue that we feel we need to regulate.
It can also be not allowed in all zoning districts by municipality if they want.
Yeah.
So as it stands, just from the legal standpoint, if we were to classify it, since we don't have it defined, it'd be lodging 30 days, we could rely on saying, hey, it's not allowed unless it's more than 30 days.
Correct. There's no express authorization to have short-term rentals
Got it.
in the zoning ordinance.
So that's where flexibility comes in. Got it. Okay.
So, since everyone's so quiet, it makes Joe talk. So I just want to say that this is tremendous for us, and just to have all the uses in one table. If you ever looked at our old list of uses, you had to go into each zoning district. So basically, you had to go 20 pages just to see the list of uses that were in that district. And then if you scratched your head and said, I don't see my use, well, then you have to go back to all the other pages of all the other districts to see if your use is allowed in those districts. This puts it all in one table, so you just go to this one table to try to figure out if your use is allowed somewhere. And then the way that we had the classifications, that you start with a group, your category, and then your subcategory, and then this ability for the zoning administrator to make determinations really helps staff, because right now, in 50 years, there have been a lot of new uses that have come about, and some of them aren't listed in our zoning ordinance, so it's really come a tremendous way.
I believe, John, you had some suggestions for some of the use classification, general authority section, to include some language. Am I incorrect in thinking that? That would be page 6-5, 6.02.
I don't think we
Clarifying.
were going to necessarily change it. I know one of the attorneys who was here last time expressed concern about how staff would interpret the groups and categories and subcategories, et cetera, to determine whether a use was allowed or not. And I know we talked today about possibly tweaking the language, but I don't have draft language to provide right now.
So if we do look at changing anything with that, we would provide those changes.
And do you want to take this opportunity to say how any changes that are going to be made
Yes.
are going to be
Yeah.
made available to the public?
Since we're approaching somewhat close to 9 o'clock, when we have changes as directed by the commission to make the changes, or at least look into the changes, we're gonna try to, we'll have videotape to go back on to make sure we have a list to go back to with those changes and recommendations from this commission when given direction. In those situations where we're providing new language, what we will likely do is provide the new language as a separate packet almost that clearly shows the old language and what was proposed and what that change is highlighted in some way. We would likely look at providing a whole new draft after the fact. If time permits, we'd likely put it in some format, but we want to make sure that those changes are called out clearly as a separate item, so it's clear to the commissioners and then clear to the public when we upload the agenda. They're not having to sift through pages and pages to know what was talked about and changed, just to provide clarity. And then at follow-up meetings, we would have the ability to open the public comment back up for them to discuss those changes from the public standpoint. So that's how we'll, if and when we continue the meeting, in your next packet of staff report stuff, it would include those packet changes, and we would specifically call out the section numbers and everything. So you won't get a whole new copy and have to look through it. It would make it a bit easier.
So that was all brand new, right there.
No, that, I think, was in what was posted online last month. Nothing new has been added since the last public hearing.
Since April 8th, I believe.
Okay, let's move on to Article 7. Accessory and temporary uses.
I have a feeling we're going to spend a decent amount of time on this section. This article, accessory and temporary uses, regulates accessory and temporary uses. It includes accessory structures and buildings and accessory uses that are generally subordinate to the primary or principal use on a property. The subordinate uses, buildings and structures have to occur in conjunction with the principal use that is allowable, either as a special or permitted use on the property or as a carryover from a non-conforming use in some way. Some of the major changes include accessory building allowances. So residential properties now have one detached garage and the ability to have one detached garage and 2 additional detached buildings at a maximum coverage amount for accessory buildings exclusively at 1,250 square feet and at a maximum height of 18 feet. We're proposing exemptions for up to 2 small sheds for residential properties up to 12 square feet or less from both the maximum building footprint and lot coverage calculations. Generally, those aren't built with bases of improved material. We're also explicitly allowing non-residential properties to have accessory buildings through the special use approval process at a maximum height of 20 feet. Currently, our code is silent on accessory buildings for non-residential properties. We are also instituting ADU regulations, accessory dwelling units. We're introducing electric vehicle charging equipment regulations, clarifying language related to specific outdoor uses as well. We have introduced language for fleet vehicles, light-duty fleet vehicles, to aid in allowing businesses such as like bakeries and some contractors to have, Sprinter vans and the like, to accommodate their principal use where we currently do not allow them. We're introducing renewable energy sources and zoning regulations related to that. We're relaxing regulations for detached garages and carports. We're relaxing regulations related to where allowable solid fences are for residential properties. We have some changes to swimming pools and hot tub regulations. We now explicitly allow generators to encroach into certain setbacks. We have specific regulations to donation boxes for an allowance on commercial properties only. And then we have specific regulations related to outdoor storage and other accessory outdoor uses not explicitly listed as a special use. For the outdoor storage, it would only be allowed as an accessory use in the M and M1 district, and they would have to receive special use approval. That's that's all I have for this, and staff, feel free to interject.
By staff, he means me.
Or Adam.
I just wanted to touch base, so the last thing you said was outdoor storage in the M1 and M. Now, the M1 and M, and I feel bad that the gentleman that was bringing up M district things left. Right now, our M district, which is our most intensive manufacturing, does not allow outdoor operations. Years ago, we injected some code into our zoning ordinance that basically had an enclosure of operations provision. So if any business is existing out there, especially down on Vendustrial where we have some highly intensive outdoor uses happening there, a lot of those are basically nonconformities that have perpetuated over time. But our M district really doesn't allow anything outdoor. We introduced the M1 district, maybe 2018 is when we did that. And we did that expressly for the properties that are along Quincy here on the east side of Cass. And that was because we had all those existing buildings over there that were geared towards outdoor stuff. And for years, we thought that might develop as residential, and that never happened. So we created this M1 district, which is considered more light industrial. But in that district, we created an allowance for some outdoor activities as a special use, and some outdoor storage as a special use. So for quite some time, our most intensive manufacturing district didn't allow anything outside. Our least intensive manufacturing district did allow stuff outside, so it was kind of reversed. So although you heard a gentleman that said they have an M district property, and they had concerns of the ability to do outdoor activities, and I believe the request was, can that be a permitted use, not a special use? Right now, it's not allowed at all. We are saying that that can be requested through this process as a special use, and then some of those, depending on the intensity, have a distance requirement to residential and a screening requirement. Staff feels fairly confident that, number one, because we are now introducing outdoor uses in the N district, and because we can't lose sight that our manufacturing districts are pretty small in comparison to other communities. If you go into Woodridge or Bolingbrook, you have industrial parks where those buildings have great distance separation from adjacent residential. We don't have that advantage here in Westmont. Most of our industrial districts, it's in one of three places. It's either here along the tracks, directly adjacent residential. It's either on the south side by Vendustrial, which has multifamily in all directions of that, and then, or up around Ty Warner Park, which has Oakwood and some other developments up there. So staff does feel that requiring a special use for those is still warranted. Now, we can discuss that further if you feel differently. I understand the point of view that the property owner has. We're looking at it from a standpoint of, we're actually giving those businesses and buildings the ability to make requests by introducing the ability to have outdoor uses. However, not go so far as to say it shouldn't be a special use. We think it should still be a special use. We think that the planning and zoning and the board would want to know what's being stored outside. Is it being moved around all the time? Is it smelly? Do they use equipment that makes noise in the middle of the night or during the day? We think that is all relevant to still scrutinize as a special use. So I just wanted to inject that piece of it.
The example we generally go back to, or is related to in the M district, is in outdoor storage in general. We had a case here for a landscape contractor in which they wanted to rezone to the M1 district because they have outdoor materials, mulch, plantings, and the like. They want to be able to store it on the property and improve the property. We viewed the limited manufacturing district as having kind of more ability to have those uses when the manufacturing district doesn't allow it. Kind of seems not intuitive because you would think limited would be more limiting in what is allowed there. So, for example, in the manufacturing district as proposed, a landscape contractor, which would be a principal use in that district, could operate if everything's enclosed. If they want outdoor storage of materials and the like, they'd have to come here for a special use, have some design aspects for screening, just to make sure that we're not impacting the surrounding areas. With a lot of these type of uses, the M1 and M district, you see trucks coming in and out all the time. So we want to make sure that we're not having large impacts, especially when we're bordering residential.
I'll just elaborate on that. That was, if for those that were on the commission, that was Mariani Landscape, and it was probably 2 years ago now. And if you remember, we did have several of the residents in the townhomes nearby that came out because they were concerned about the smells that the mulch and the other materials had. So we don't want to lose that ability to do that special use.
I think with regard to testimony at the last meeting, do we need to differentiate, or do we differentiate between outdoor storage vehicles and parking of vehicles in the M district?
I could interject a little bit. So we have what are called accessory parking, which would be parking for employees, parking for customers on a certain property. That's largely allowed in most districts where that's a need. That's accessory parking. Accessory off-street parking, I think is what it's specifically called out as. We are providing provisions for fleet vehicles. Fleet vehicles, in this case, the light duty, which I'm happy to discuss, changing some of that language as well to be more specific. Those would be like your Sprinter vans that can fit in normal spaces, parking spaces. Those aren't your semi-trailers, tractor trailers. So we have provisions for that. I believe it's 2 per business is allowed. Anything more than that, they'd have to come in and ask for approval. And in those cases, they have to meet the minimum parking requirement for their use, their principal use on the property. And then in addition, can have the fleet vehicles.
Scott, can I stop you right there for a second? So fleet is not trucks like semi-trucks. Fleet is basically trying to accommodate, because it's not really exclusive to the M districts, it's
Correct.
in all districts. We have lots of businesses in our B2 or C1 that have some need for a few small fleet vehicles. The example I'll use is, I believe there's a generator retailer down at 63rd and Fairview that took over the little small engine repair building that's there. And they have 2 or 3 little vans that they park there overnight. Technically, our code doesn't say that that's allowed. So what the fleet section is trying to do is create allowances for those businesses that have a few needs to park some of those vehicles, and if they have them, how many should they be limited to, and where should they park them? Because we don't want them to use them as signage. We don't want them to, if you remember the old Rusco windows at 63rd and Cass, bought 2 dilapidated U-Hauls and put one on each intersection so that they could advertise. We don't want people to just do that and park vans out there in order to advertise their business. So fleet is to accommodate these small uses. So I'll stop there because I think then you were going to move on to the next one. But we've had several people that have asked us, sounds like your fleet is really limiting on the outdoor trucks. And we're like, well, no, this is, fleet in this definition is trying to create a new accommodation for those smaller needs for businesses.
The other section relating to this, so for outdoor storage areas, that's only for storage of goods or merchandise, so it's not applicable in that section. We have, in that same section, at 7.20, D, other outdoor accessory uses, which is basically somewhat of a catch-all for uses we might not be thinking of to accommodate. In those cases, they have to come in for a special use permit so we know what they're doing related to that outdoor use. Sometimes we get businesses that might have accessory outdoor sales of some point. We have some provisions that allow them to have a certain percentage of outdoor sales in the code as well. But for outdoor storage of trucks, tractor trailers, logistics type of uses, or repair uses where there's storage of those vehicles outside, it'd be viewed as an accessory use. The other outdoor accessory use provisions, and they'd have to come in for approval. So we know how it's going to be impacting those neighboring properties and have the ability to regulate it a bit more.
Scott, can I ask a question? I think it might be an error, or I don't know if I have. I know that staff may have gotten an older version.
You have the older version. The
So-
current version that the commissioner should have, the outdoor storage section should say M1 in it.
Okay, because mine says.
Sorry, I didn't
just-
update your page.
No,
why.
that's okay, and I knew that there was that thing. I just wanted to make sure that was pointed out.
And that has also been reflected in what was posted to the website. So only staff members have an older copy. The public and the commissioners have both been provided with something up to date.
So Scott, would it be fair if I have a business and I have a lot of trucking needs, that if it wasn't a special use by definition of what my business is, I could say, well, I have this outdoor storage area for the trucks. I need to add a special use for the outdoor storage area. Is that how it would work?
Yeah.
So I think you heard Scott say earlier, what we aren't doing in this code is, right now, our current zoning ordinance does not allow exclusive primary outdoor storage businesses. So if I bought a vacant lot and put up a fence around it and said I was going to rent it to everyone that wants to store their RV, we don't currently allow that, because the primary use on that lot would be outdoor storage. Doesn't mean that other businesses that exist on the property, so I'm a manufacturer, that I'm manufacturing something in the building, doesn't mean I can't have trucks stored on the property as an accessory use as an outdoor storage area, or materials as an outdoor storage area. So it's just the way the code is written, because we are limited in the amount of M districts we have because of the sensitivity to the outdoor uses and adjacent to residential. We do not currently have outdoor storage as a primary use, primary use on the property on its own, so.
And
But
that's-
there's a lot
that's
of
something
ability
that's Not
for-
changing, right?
What's that?
That's not changing.
Could you repeat it? Sorry.
I believe he said that's not changing.
No,
The-
in reference
The
to.
ability to have outdoor storage as a primary use
That is not
is not
changing.
changing.
Yes,
That's not
it is,
permitted.
it is. We are not introducing the ability to have outdoor storage as a primary use.
Only as accessory as a special use.
Correct.
I just have a couple of things I want to comment. And I have this is actually a fair amount of area I practice with, specifically with trucks. So I think maybe where the gentleman's getting, and it might just be a word here, when the term is used in the trucking industry, when they use the term fleet, it usually means a group. And so if you said we allow fleet parking, my thinking is I can rent that to Amazon. That Amazon trucks, 18-wheelers, the boxes, the vans, Sprinter, whatever it is, that's what I think when I think fleet. And I would think comparing to other lots, what you're trying to prevent is someone running a reselling or a parking where you could have multiple different companies or owner-operators coming in, so that you're trying to prevent. But if you have a fleet like Amazon, you would allow it. That's at least my understanding of how I'm reading it, where there maybe is confusion. To me, it wasn't allowed before. So if you bought something and it's going to throw it up, you kind of took that risk when you knew ahead of time we didn't allow it. But I do understand and I can appreciate what he said, this actually does cause more uncertainty, because the moment you hear we allow fleet, but then we don't in reality from what their industry considers fleet, I would strongly recommend that we, staff, put in a definition maybe at the end of how we intend to define it, just because that could potentially be an issue down the road, and it would be helpful to have the definition, even if we can say, like, this is not intended, to avoid any ambiguity, it's not intended to mean this.
Yeah, and I think our attorney also we had a discussion with him related to that in particular. We think, I believe we want, right now, we just categorize as light-duty motor vehicles. I think we need to provide clear definition related to that.
We have a definition in another chapter of the Village Code of Ordinances for commercial vehicles, which is defined as vehicles with license plate classifications greater than D. And so the state lists license plate classifications based on weight and capacity of trucks, et
They
cetera.
skip like every other letter, like D, F, H for reasons
Yes.
passing understanding.
So that's how we define it in, I think it's chapter 78, and we want to take that definition for commercial vehicle, basically incorporate it into the zoning ordinance, or at least reference it clearly. Right now, there is a reference to chapter 78, but it's not to that specific section. So maybe it'd be better just to take that whole definition and put in the zoning ordinance, and then maybe have a better definition, to your point, of what a fleet vehicle is. It's not a commercial vehicle as defined, and then maybe provide some examples. If you look up online from a zoning perspective what a fleet vehicle is, it generally means those light vans and stuff. It doesn't mean a semi-truck, but I can see the confusion. A fleet of vehicles could be construed as a large group of semi-trucks or other commercial vehicles.
No, it's spot on. So I think that would be incredibly helpful, at least. It tells people yes or no whether it's allowed. And then I guess the question is, do we allow it anywhere in the village? Is there, and I recognize that part of the difficulty here might be the fact that we're eventually doing a comprehensive plan, and we probably would love Ty Warner Park not to show up as a manufacturing zoning, the park itself. But I guess the question would be, long-term, are we kind of getting an idea that we're gonna start making an area more manufacturing and it's not gonna be there? Are we moving it elsewhere, or is it just gonna kind of always be really light manufacturing in the?
Go ahead.
Well, the current comprehensive plan, in particular to the Ty Warner area, actually listed it as light manufacturing. So the current comprehensive plan is already trying to downplay the intensity of that area. Now, I can't speak to how the new comp plan will try to address, but it is odd that our Premier Park is the biggest manufacturing parcel in town. And that predates when I worked here. But parks are an allowed use in the M district, surprisingly. I hesitate to say where we're going with M district stuff. I don't think that we're looking at necessarily expanding it. But, the office market has changed. There's a lot of dynamic happening in terms of how people are trying to use those right now. So I think what it is right now, we don't have a lot of property that can accommodate what you consider fleet very well, because even though we try to call it an industrial park, it really wasn't built for semi-truck at a regular basis, in fact, Ty Warner is only served by one traffic light, which is over there by Chipotle, and I think we all know that traffic light does not support truck traffic very well. So I think that with what we're doing, the reason we're not trying to introduce that as a primary use is we don't know that the area can support it efficiently.
Sure.
So.
No, and that makes sense. When you mentioned the PI districts that we're proposing, would Ty Warner Park be an example of something that you'd want? So potentially, if that were to occur, this giant area would have only like an outline of manufacturing, and the biggest parcel, which makes up probably a third at least, maybe nearly half, would be PI.
In theory, yes, but
Okay.
we probably won't force the Park District to do any rezonings.
But from a comprehensive plan,
Yes,
that's.
From a
the-
comprehensive
okay.
plan, yes.
Okay, that makes sense. And then, I'm sorry, I had two notes. Love the fire pit. That stopped an argument with the police. That was wonderful. Fire stack, you have defined on one of them that there is a side setback, but I couldn't find what it was or where it was. I know it looks like there's a rear setback, but it doesn't look like it's defined where the stack is. I just wasn't sure.
We have an allowance in the encroachment table. So that's on page, that's 7-4. And it's number 22. Firewood stack, not to exceed 4 feet in height. And then it's allowed, or not allowed in the street setback, it's not allowed, and it is allowed in the side street, or side setback and the rear setback.
Got it. It's allowed in the setback.
Yes.
Understood, sorry.
So
I was
correct.
thinking there
Yeah.
is a setback and I couldn't find the requirement. Okay.
Sorry, what number was that on this sheet?
In the encroachment table,
Yeah.
it's 22.
Should be in the middle of page 7-4.
Yeah.
And that's, a lot of that's carried over from current code. You can see the red, we're reducing the language.
Yep.
It was pretty specific for some reason.
Scott, since you're in the encroachment table, I don't think we talked about porches.
We can delve into it. I think we touched on it at the last meeting, and I'm happy to discuss it more. We have provided now, in our current code, we don't have provisions related to encroachment for porches, front porches in particular. We're allowing front porches to encroach into that front yard setback. I believe it's 8 feet into that front yard setback specifically. Front porches are defined as having a canopy over it or roofed. It wouldn't be equated to a deck. And we can have that discussion if we want to allow that in the front yard setback to a degree.
A few years ago over by Veterans Park. Because it fit with.
The reason we're doing that is oftentimes at the permitting stage for new houses and existing houses, especially in the downtown area, we're not able to permit those. It's if front porches to be in those setbacks currently because they're considered part of the primary structure. In this case, because we're allowing them as accessory structures that are just attached to the building, we have the ability to allow them to encroach. Generally, planning practice, we want to promote
Eyes on the street.
eyes on the street, traditional neighborhoods. When sprawling happened, it took a lot of that away. But that's generally good planning practice, especially in your TOD areas near the train.
So we could, I'm glad that you guys, that it's 8 feet. What I was afraid is that if you did it, that it would only be like, say, 4 feet, which is a pointless porch. But like, so 8 feet people could actually use. But is it that, so you allow 8 feet of porch because it has a roof, but not if it doesn't have a roof, then you wouldn't.
If it doesn't have a roof, I believe it'd either be categorized as a deck or a front landing. Those front landings can be up to, I think it's 100 square feet in the current code, and that's carried over. And that's to allow people to step out onto their property safely.
And then I just, that was the and it's clear, is it, in the contextual setbacks, that porches don't apply? Is it to contextual?
Yeah, so
setbacks?
porches are viewed separately from the building now. Those porches are considered accessory, so if the conceptual setback allows the house to go farther up, the porch can go that extra 8 feet as well.
Right. I just imagine neighbors saying, like, why can't I build my house up that far? My neighbor's built his porch up that far. And then just a clarification, like, Anyway, it's not, I mean, things are always gonna come up, but, just to,
No, that's a good comment.
Can I ask a question related to that? So
Yes.
for the contextual setback, if my neighbor's porch,
We wouldn't include it.
so you'd be using the primary house to delineate the line that then allows my contextual setback for the front of my house, and then I can add a porch to encroach 8
Yeah,
feet
that,
past
that's,
that.
that's my understanding of how the conceptual setbacks work. I know Kirk's in the code right now, so he might correct me.
and
So that's the intent. I think we could, as suggested, make it that clearer than it is, that the porch is not included either in measuring your neighboring property's setback or in determining what your contextual setback is. We're measuring to the front building wall, not including the
The living space,
Yes,
basically.
yeah.
And that makes sense to me,
Yeah.
to do it that way.
yeah, the next, just because I see lots of porches and just how things are done over time, is the next step then, of course, from a homeowner, was that they'll enclose those porches, or at least, there's lots of enclosed porches in Chicago area. So is there, if you see someone trying to enclose their porch, do you put up a stop work order, or is that the procedure?
I'm
That's
not-
gonna happen.
I'm not at liberty to discuss code enforcement, how they operate generally. But the,
I can.
first, for porches in particular, they are outlined in the encroachment table as being open on at least 3 sides.
Right.
So non-enclosed, just roofed.
And so we would consider trying to enclose one needing a permit, and whenever we see work without permit occurring, we try to intervene.
Yep.
Sorry, I got one more. It's the hot tub. Just out of curiosity, I'm curious if anyone else, I don't have one, but I would like the idea of having one. But having a fence around a hot tub seems a little excessive, no? Just in this era, there's plunge pools now. I know people are jumping in cold water. I don't necessarily jump on board that train, but, you know, there's a big trend right now from a fitness standard for plunge pools. Hot tubs, they always had the covers on top. So for me, it's not the attractive nuisance where you can fall in. Is there a way we can potentially revise this, or is there something in particular that we're following suit? The pools are supposed to be fenced by state law, so I follow that. I don't think it applies to hot tubs.
I don't know off the top of my head. I know the institution for hot tubs in particular was proposed through the building department's review
Okay.
as being allowed because it's ambiguous in our current code. We can certainly look into it to see if it needs to be required or not, if we're just matching other code sections. But I understand the point for usually they're not at ground level either, they're usually above anyway.
And I would be fully supportive, just from a staff perspective, if it's required when it's not in use or operation that it's covered, that makes sense. I understand the safety aspect of it. I think it would actually look sillier from a planning perspective of you have just a 20 square foot area fenced off.
How
Yeah.
tall does the fence have to be, too?
Is it 4 feet, 40 inches? Or?
I don't know off the top of my head.
It's either 3 or 4 feet.
For the state, right?
Statewide, for the
Yeah,
state.
that it's being derived out of a safety measure. That's not something that we picked and said, Charlie, I want to see you in your hot tub, type scenario, so.
I had that circled as well, as being a little.
We can confirm that with the building department where they're
We
pulling
can
that
also
piece of code.
look at pulling it out as a separate thing and just regulate it for setbacks, rather than throwing it in with the pool regulations.
And like I said, they all have the tops too, so to me, that is the safety factor.
Let me see, if you don't mind me, is just outdoor seating. I think someone mentioned at the previous meeting. It says about like having a fence around that, but then is that like, that's not the same as like, say, businesses on Casper. Do they have to have a
So,
fence?
I want to make a clear distinction between different outdoor dining practices with the village. On Quincy Avenue here, the new brick paver area, with your resurfaced, that is considered outdoor dining on village-owned property. So that's in the public right-of-way. We have a separate process of outdoor dining in those circumstances through the clerk's office. So it does not control that. They have separate code. It's the municipal code. For outdoor, the proposed language here is for new outdoor patios, because we don't currently have regulations to even allow them technically, specifically outlined in the code. So this is just for those new outdoor areas. We have provision, outdoor dining areas, we have provisions implemented in the code for allowances. I think it's 4 seats for a lot of the downtown businesses that maybe have some room to allow those outdoor seats that don't get in the way of traffic of any kind on the property. That's an egress issue.
But if there's a storefront that has like, say, like a 5-foot setback from the sidewalk, do they have to have a fence around those tables?
If they have only 4 seats, I believe it is, no, they're exempt from those regulations. Anything more than that, they would technically have to abide by those or come in.
I'm thinking in front of, I know like, say, the restaurant built that big part to their side, but I think on their front, I think they also have a few seats, do they? No?
I believe those are fenced in though.
Are they?
They're kind of enclosed with a canopy, I believe.
Okay.
To a degree.
There is a fence on those tables that are on the front.
On
too.
pass.
So I had some questions. I grilled Adam before the meeting because this is something new that we're proposing. And we're coming from the standpoint of if someone builds a new restaurant, the patio is an extension of the restaurant, and it should be a pleasant environment. So it should basically carry your landscape around it, fence it in, make it something that is secure. Now, there are a lot of ways to allow administrative approval of stuff. So in the downtown, or if I was in a shopping center, there are ways to dismiss the landscape requirements. But any request to remove a fence requirement, the way it's currently written, would be a variance. And that may be a bit harsh. We were coming from the standpoint of if a new building is built. We weren't looking at it from all aspects of, well, someone might have 5 feet and be able to put 6 tables outside, and should that really be fenced? The option is we can remove the fence requirement. But I can tell you this, that I was the planner that did the neat patio.
Okay.
And that proposal, when it first came into us, was basically a slab with a cover over it. And anyone could have backed their car right up into the slab where people were parking, or where people were eating. So staff had to say, well, you should probably build a curb and put some landscape and try to control the people that are drinking so that they don't just wander out into the parking lot where a car is coming through. And tried to sensitively work with the property owner to figure out how to make it work. If we had these ordinances, then we could have easily said, well, no, you have to fence it, you have to, think thoughtfully about how you place it. So we're happy to modify that, that's what it is right now, as proposed.
I like the idea of fence or other appropriate enclosure as determined by the zoning administrator, because you see planners oftentimes that form a barrier around an outdoor seating area that are very attractive, add a safety element, maybe even more so than a fence.
Yeah.
So just build in a little flexibility might be a good idea.
I would second that as well. I think having an option is better than saying thou must have a fence.
And foundational landscaping also, I think there's oftentimes not room for that, but.
And there's already provision in here that says that can be flexed.
Okay.
So,
But like a barrier of some kind is what we want. So it can be landscaping, it can be mobile planters for just the warm months, it could be a fence. Some barrier, but it doesn't have to be a fence.
and I think we can make that.
Yeah, we'll look into it. I think the major thing is, NEAT's a great example. NEAT had to come in for site plan approval for that patio. In the new code, something like that wouldn't need site plan approval. That's why we're implementing design regulations. And we want to make it easier for them to utilize their property how they deem necessary. So that would just be a permit that would come in. If they're meeting the standards, we could approve it.
Yeah. So we haven't got to the approval processes, and we won't tonight. But there's a lot more administrative approvals, which means that less and less will come before planning and zoning or the board. And so we were trying to kind of build in some design requirements so that if you meet these design requirements, then you don't have to go through these processes. So if it sounds like the way we can write it with a fence or barrier or, something that we could do, we can still satisfy that without completely just giving up the idea that there should be some separation that occurs there.
Commissioner Thomas, did you have a comment?
No, I'm just watching the time. I just want to thank staff and the consultant and all the work you've done to bring this stuff up to date. And it's a lot of, obviously, a big job and a lot of work, and it's all been appreciated. I'd like to thank you all for your efforts.
Mr. Chair, before we say our goodbyes, I didn't hear direction. So Commissioner Sharp brought up the floor height on a couple of those structures. Now, what was not being proposed was that we were changing the ultimate height. I believe I can state that Commissioner Sharp is somewhat an expert in those areas. Would it be appropriate if staff took the heights that he provided to us and modified those for the text changes? So we're not changing the ultimate heights, which I think is a much bigger discussion, but the ultimate floor heights on that first floor and that penthouse floor, I do think that he's probably more on trend than we are. So would you be comfortable if staff made those changes, since we're going to make those changes for the next meeting?
I certainly would.
Do you want to straw poll that one real
Seeing
quick?
a lot of head nods.
Any objections? Everyone agree?
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you.
Is there, like, I do have comments on ADUs, but I know it's late, so will there be another opportunity later? Or?
So do you want to resume with section 7? Okay, we'll resume with section 7 next time.
But yes, to answer his question, he can go back and ask, obviously, about ADUs at the next public hearing, if you like.
Sure, I just have, it's in regards to heights, and the basement depth is kind of silly. That's what's written in it, but, yeah, we could.
Oh, yeah.
I have a lot of comments left on 7 as well.
Oh,
So-
okay. So we'll take up where we left off, and yeah, if you want to go back to ADUs, we certainly can. So, we'll continue this next time, but
What's that date? June?
that will be June 11th, second Wednesday at 6 o'clock. So, we don't need we do need a motion and second to continue to a date certain.
Continue the public hearing, which is still open to,
To continue the public hearing to June 11th, 2025 at the regular PZC meeting at 6 o'clock. And do I have a motion?
Motion, Simpson?
Motion Simpson, second?
Second,
Second Thomas. Discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Simpson?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas?
yes.
Commissioner Peterson votes yes. Commissioner Sharp?
Yes.
Commissioner Lynn?
Yes.
Commissioner Donahue?
Yes.
Chairperson Carmichael?
Yes. Okay, and under new business, continuing for tonight, there is none. Open forum. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address any issue that was not on our agenda? Seeing none, we've already said, okay, so that will be continued at, what was the date, June 11th?
June 11th.
June
June
11th.
11th, and, but next Tuesday night, we'll still have a regular
Wednesday.
planning and zoning meeting, so.
Wednesday night.
Yes, we-
Did I say Tuesday?
You did.
Next Wednesday night, the 14th of May.
We will have 3 separate zoning cases to be heard that night. So please let me know if you are not able to attend as soon as possible.
But we won't be discussing this.
We will not be discussing this. This will be saved for June 11th at the normal PZC meeting, which we will likely have 1 case for. So
There was talk
Okay.
over a meeting after that. Did that get scrapped? Like before Memorial Day? Wasn't there a talk about doing 3 in May?
we were looking at 3, but
All right,
yeah,
got
the
it.
chair
Just wanna make
decided.
sure- That's what I thought. I just want to make sure I didn't miss something.
Okay, Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion, Simpson?
Second.
Simpson? Sharp. Sharp. And show of hands, all in favor? This meeting is adjourned.